All right, what is going on? It is drive time. It's a Wednesday afternoon. It's about 14 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. Sunny and kind of warm for a January day, about 38, 39 degrees. You can see the blue skies here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, hosting the program today on this Wednesday afternoon. That's Porter Larson producing today. Booking the show with a lot of good guests, a lot of different topics. We're going to bounce around a little bit, talk a bunch of different topics on the program today on this Wednesday afternoon. So my computer just died, but luckily I have a charger in here, so I'm going to plug my computer in while I am introing the show. You know, unfortunately, I have an old charger at home, and you guys don't give a rip about this, but I plug it in, and it works 90% of the time, so I go to bed and feel like I'm going to wake up to a charged laptop, and oftentimes I don't, and I guess that's today. Anyway, hello, how are you? We've got a lot to talk about today. The NBA trade deadline is getting a lot of attention. The Utah Jazz linked to a bunch of different rumors, bunch of different possibilities, did a little exercise today to maybe talk a little bit about what the Jazz could potentially do prior to this February 6th trade deadline. Will they get involved in the framework of a bigger deal, namely with De'Aaron Fox or Jimmy Butler? Of course, the Miami Heat's Jimmy Butler situation appears to be untenable. And if you're the Utah Jazz, you have a bunch of different optionality, See what I did there? To get involved. Clean books, about $27 million in cap space, a bevy of picks still at your disposal, even after that trade with the Phoenix Suns. So we're going to do a little Jazz basketball, a little NBA basketball on the program today. Jazz lost to the Warriors last night. They are the second worst team in pro basketball. Washington has that honor as of right now. So the Jazz in the mix for the best possible chance at the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. And if you have not been watching Duke basketball, I would encourage you to do so because, of course, Duke needs more eyes. It's about time something went right for Duke basketball. But this is starting to become, at least in my opinion, a little bit reminiscent of the Victor Wembanyama, like Scoot Henderson debate. And I always get a kick out of people that seem to just zig when everybody else is zagging. Like, hey, I kind of like Scoot. It's like, shut up, man. We've all watched Wembanyama play. We know that he's going to be different. And Cooper Flag continues to separate himself, in my opinion, from the rest of his class. So why are the Jazz doing all of this is the question. Well, if you have the opportunity potentially to luck into that spot, and the Jazz have been in the lottery 9 times in the 50-plus year existence of the organization. They have never moved up one time. So they're due, is what I'm saying. They're due. You got to stay in the game, and hopefully at some point things will go your way. So we'll do some Jazz basketball on the show today. Of course, we're still just under 2 weeks away from Super Bowl 59, but it's never a bad time to talk a little pro football. So we'll talk some Super Bowl. We'll talk some Senior Bowl. We'll do some college football, some Ute players impressing, some local players impressing at the Senior Bowl. So we'll get into some of that on the program today. Real Salt Lake continues their preseason action with a game today, a match today. Sorry, soccer fans, in preparation for the CONCACAF game that's just a few weeks away before the regular season for RSL begins. So we'll do some RSL on the program today. We'll do some Utah Hockey Club on the show today. We'll talk some NHL hockey, get you ready for a game tonight between Pittsburgh and the Utah Hockey Club here in Salt Lake City. That's a 7:30 tip time at the Delta Center. Utah Jazz are off tonight. They're going to take on Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves here in Salt Lake City. We'll also do some college basketball. 2 good, close games last night locally in college basketball with both the Utes and the Cougars getting wins. Utah beats Cincinnati 69-66. How about some free throws for our Utes, huh? Knocking down some foul pitches, as my buddy would say, down the stretch to get a good win. Cincinnati was preseason top 25. They're certainly not the team most people thought they would be, but a good defensive team came into Salt Lake City, and Utah was able to handle them. Baylor smoked Utah here in Salt Lake, went down to Provo, and that was a good overtime game. A lot of NBA scouts in the building, so we'll talk about BYU's win over Baylor. Apparently, Conor McGregor is a BYU fan now. I don't know. I think he was there with the Bucked Up Supplements guys. Whatever. A lot of people really pumped about that, which is really interesting on a number of different levels. But anyway, college basketball topically today as well. Our first guest, the head coach of Real Salt Lake. Pablo Mastroianni makes his triumphant return to the Drive. Usually after the season ends, we bid our farewell to our guy Pablo and whoever's managing the club, and then we welcome them back as soon as RSL is topical, and they are, as preseason is upon us. Neil Smith breaks down the latest on the Utah Hockey Club, and we'll kind of take a swing around the NHL to understand where we're at with our local hockey team and what could be next for them. Sean Mooney, our buddy who calls Utah basketball games alongside Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, will stop by to talk about Utah's win. And then Aaron Schatz will give us a comprehensive preview of the Super Bowl, and we'll do some NFL draft and some Senior Bowl as well with Aaron. So RSL with Pablo Mastroianni, Utah Hockey Club with Neil Smith, Utah basketball with Sean Mooney, and college and pro football with Aaron Schatz. Going to do a little bit of everything on the show today. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Wednesday afternoon. What has your attention? I was thinking about this because I sat down today.
Yep.
It's like 2 weeks ago I was going to do the whole Big 12 football thing. Today
Nice.
I sat down this morning, and the Big 12 football thing it's dumb. Don't do it. It's just a headache. But today I sat down. I'm like, I'm going to do a little Jazz trade guide. Okay, and we're going to get creative because I'm the guy about a month ago that was pleading for the Zion Williamson transaction to happen.
You were doing that.
Pie in the sky did not work. As of now,
Not yet.
We're not yet. We're saying goodbye to football. What's got the Porter Larson attention?
Oh, man. In the sports world, obviously, basketball's being brought closer to the front of mind, but I still struggle with fully diving into hoops until, first off, the rosters are finalized after the trade deadline, after the guys have gotten the sillies out of All-Star Weekend, right? They get serious after All-Star Weekend.
Sillies?
I don't know what to call it.
What? You would be a good dad. If you're using terms like that, you would be a good father.
But
get the sillies out.
You know what I'm saying.
Of course I do.
After the trade deadline, guys get serious. After the All-Star break, guys get serious. Postseason basketball, tournament basketball is different. We know this. So, yeah, it's kind of an odd moment. We've got some soccer. As you said, a soccer game today. You also, hey, I gotta bring it up because you went there. You also said the tip at 7:30 tonight. You're gonna make the soccer fans and the hockey fans mad.
Oh, I said that for the hockey club?
Yeah.
I was plugging my computer in while getting my notes ready.
Live on YouTube.
And also making sure that I have all my reads done. So the puck drops at 7:30.
Thank you.
Okay. Gee, you know what? I hear it from the idiots online. I don't need to hear it from my producer.
But yeah, what's got my attention, you mentioned it, the sights and scenes in Provo last night. The Utes getting the W. I'm just here with my bucked up supplements on YouTube Live.
The hypocrisy, you know what? Whatever. Conor McGregor's a BYU fan.
He's I don't know, had some other things going on the past month or so. I don't know if I'd really be parading him around, but that's a different conversation.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed Conor McGregor watching BYU basketball. Nothing is real. Dwayne Wade plays golf in Provo. Conor McGregor watches BYU basketball. Nothing's real anymore.
Have you seen a Conor McGregor jump shot?
No, but I can imagine it's not great.
It's awesome.
Okay, fair enough. All right, our first guest, my guy Pablo, will do a little. So it's a soccer match, and the puck drops tonight at 7:30. You can save the emails. But before we get to Pablo, the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. It's time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text TRIP right now to 508-777-1000. Text TRIP to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us at ESPN 700. All right, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too, at Standard Restaurant Supply. Your one-stop shop for all your tailgate needs. Check them out downtown or online. Standard Restaurant Supply. Appreciate them. It is time now on a Wednesday for your opening tip. All right, little college basketball last night locally, and it was an exciting night. Fun to kind of switch back and forth, keep one eye on the Utah Jazz, but the Utah Jazz are not serious about basketball this year. So the Jazz lost to the Warriors last night, 114-103. And, you know, some bright spots. They continue to bring Keontae George off the bench. I do think that's one topic rotationally with what Will Hardy's trying to do that is not nothing. I do think there's a little meat on that bone, but I just can't crack the mic every day and break down the splits between Drew Eubanks, Kyle Filipowski, and Micah Potter. Like those things don't matter because those players, Filipowski might be around for a while. He's big with some skill. But what Will is trying to do with Keontae, I think, means something. 32 minutes off the bench for Keontae last night. But here's the deal. 2 of 8 from the floor, 0 of 5 from 3, 4 turnovers. He did not play well. And the reason I keep, kind of bringing up the Keontae stuff is it's clear that they think they've got something with him. And they have made it very clear that he's part of their future plans. And I'm not really sure that I'm there with him yet. He has been selected to the Rising Stars Challenge. Isaiah Collier continues to capitalize on his minutes, and I'm kind of more intrigued with Isaiah than I thought I would be. Came out of high school, highly touted, one of the top 2 or 3 recruits in his class, goes to USC 1 year under Andy Enfield that just was weird. Bronny James was on that team. And there's a reason why the Jazz were excited when he was available late in the first round because he was kind of one of those Michael Porter Jr. stories when Michael Porter Jr. was in high school. A lot of people thought he was going to be the number 1 pick and change the game. I mean, he was thought to be kind of like a Kevin Durant clone, goes to Mizzou, gets hurt, falls in the first round, and the Nuggets are able to grab a player that's turned out to be really good, not generationally special, but Isaiah Collier might be the same situation. A lot of conversation regarding Lauri Markkanen, who did not play last night. Now, Markkanen cannot be traded because the Jazz signed him on the day after that the deadline was in place. And they gave him a max deal, meaning he's on the roster this year and he's potentially on the roster moving forward. So they can't trade him, but ultimately his numbers are down across the board. I heard a lot of podcast people talking about this over the past 24, 48 hours as we try to get ready for the trade deadline. And, we had Tim McMahon on yesterday, and I talked to Tim about what the Jazz could potentially do. Bobby Marks has released his NBA trade deadline tiers and the biggest questions for all 30 teams. The Jazz continue to kind of exist in that area where they simply would be a facilitator for a team that's trying to make a large deal because the Jazz have $27 million in cap space. They can absorb a contract and waive a player. And Utah continues to have a bevy of draft capital at their disposal, even with the 3 picks that they sent on to Phoenix in exchange for that 2031 unprotected. Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins are the names to kind of keep an eye on. And I do think all 3 of those players would help potentially contending teams. And look, if the Jazz were competitive and if they were one of the teams throwing punches with some of the better teams in the West, I can understand why you'd be frustrated if the Jazz would simply be a facilitator to get a deal done with a good team in the West. Because it's like, wait, you're competing against them. But is there a way the Jazz could be the facilitator for a deal, the third or the fourth team in the framework of a larger deal that actually wouldn't benefit a team in the long run because the Jazz window is 4 or 5 years down the road? So this is a team that's simply not going to be very interesting to watch the rest of the year, and they might not be very interesting to watch for the next couple of years, but it's somewhat interesting to consider the options they have at their disposal prior to this February 6th trade deadline. A lot of the attention is on Jimmy Butler. A lot of the attention is on De'Aaron Fox as the Kings have announced they're opening up trade talks for him, and we'll see what the Jazz do. We'll get back to some hoops coming up in a bit because I have a lot of thoughts on Utah's win over Cincinnati, BYU's win over Baylor, but we'll do a little RSL coming up on the other side with Pablo Mastroeni. Then it's Neil Smith, Sean Mooney, and Aaron Schatz. Busy show on a Wednesday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Neil Smith on the show. We'll break down the latest with the Utah Hockey Club. Hockey Club's in action tonight, taking on Pittsburgh here in Salt Lake City. Still in the mix, right there for a wild card spot. Got to start getting, obviously, better results consistently. We'll bring in Neil. Sean Mooney was on the call last night for the Utah men's basketball win over Cincinnati. Aaron Schatz stops by later on for some college and pro football. But RSL, I believe, just finished up a match. And we're going to go live on site, if I'm understanding this correctly, where the head coach makes his triumphant return to the Drive. Pablo Mastroianni. Pobs, how empty has your life been without the ability to talk to me every single week?
Man, it's like Groundhog Day all over again. It's been quite lonely, to be honest, Spence. But super excited to be back at it. A different feel from the group, a different vibe, and the guys are doing a great job, and so super excited to be back at it.
Love it. And before we get to what just occurred in your second preseason match, and before we get to what could occur coming up this year, this will be the only hit, Pablo, where we have to be a little bit honest with ourselves about what's happened this offseason. And we'll look back, and we won't do this all year. I promise you that. And I do respect, understand, and appreciate the way that you think and the way that you approach your job and the way that you approach life. And, surrender doesn't mean to give up. It means to accept radically what your situation is. And I get all that. But the universe took away a lot of goals, Pablo. The universe took away a lot of attacking players. And, I'll start with Chicho. And like I said, this will be the one time we do this, but we just have to do it because that's the name of the game. So I was stunned, and I know a lot of people behind the scenes were not, because this may have been a long time coming in a way that most of us simply do not understand. I've been close enough to locker rooms to know that the rest of us on the outside just don't really understand exactly what's going on. So from your perspective, how did something that started out so bright and so exciting crumble so spectacularly that ended with him being shipped off to San Jose?
Yeah, it's I think life just moves quick, especially in pro sports, and I think, Chicho had a great first part of last season, and then after the suspension, just couldn't find his way anymore. And I think there's a lot of variables, and a lot of variables of which I'm not privy to either, right? So we're kind of in the dark. I think when we had the end of the year meeting with all the players, Chicho at that moment was coming back. But as the preseason wore on, he was asking to find a different place, right? And so again, like, these are things that you can't understand, and obviously you don't want to pry deep into people's personal lives and private lives. But again, I think just being a club that puts players first, it was the right thing to do for both the player, the team, and the club. And again, if it wasn't, if it wasn't Chicho leading it, I think there's a million different things that we could have done. But when a player, especially of his magnitude, starts talking about finding a different place, then it doesn't do us any good to try to like change what his mind is, because he already knows what we're about, what we do, how we work, and so I think there's a lot of things that we still don't understand. But again, like I said, like this business, things change quickly, and the most important thing for us now is to adapt to the players that we currently have, put all our love and energy into these guys, and whilst it may not look the same as it did last year, I'm really excited about what I've seen to this point, and this is 2 weeks into preseason from this group of guys.
Matt Crooks also was sent on his way, and my understanding is it was kind of not the same deal as Chicho, but potentially there was some family stuff, and maybe he just wanted to get closer to home. Maybe his wife wanted to get closer to home. So just kind of same question, your thoughts on a guy that you played a lot last year and did a lot of good things for, Matt Crooks, moving on.
Yeah, again, a similar situation where, his family never moved out here last year, and it was his first time leaving the country to play soccer, and obviously it's a long ways from England, and he's got two little boys, and all year was a real struggle for him off the field, and what I really love about Crooks was that was never an excuse. He left his heart out on the field for the guys and for the club, which was awesome. But again, another one of these situations where, he'd asked, if he could, find a different spot back at home, and now he's with Hull City and doing well. So, there's these ideals that you'd like to have as a team and as a club where we can, keep a core group of guys year in and year out. But the truth is that there's so many variables in each individual's life that it's really difficult. And again, going back to like what we think about when we think about our team and we think about the club is you're either all in or you're all out, because it doesn't never do anyone any good to be half here, half there. We need to get 100% commitment from every player, staff member, to be the kind of club that we think we can be. And so both of these cases were really unique. I wouldn't say they're the standard as to dealing with, some of these players that have left this year. It just happened to be two guys in 1 year.
Last one, then we'll get to what's next and who you have on the roster now, and hopefully garner a little of excitement for a fan base that's kind of looking around going, wait a second. I mean, look, Pablo, you know this. You guys set a single-season record for points in club history. You set a single-season record for goals scored in club's history. I just don't think anybody was expecting this mass exodus and kind of stripping it down to the studs. But you and I spoke often last year what I perceived to be a very professional approach to the role that Anderson Julio was asked to play. Whether you brought him in off the bench, whether he had to start because Chicho was sideways or whatever, and you elect to move him on as well. What are your thoughts on that transaction?
So again, I think there's again a lot of different variables. And Julio Anderson has been an unbelievable fan games, right? And this year with the void of Chicho, he can start X amount of games. And the truth is, whenever he had 3 or 4 starts in a row, he always had hamstring issues. And so that was a big part of it. And then also the impetus from, I think, Dallas and component to that deal as well, right? And so you take the tactical piece. Do we think he can do this over the course of 34 games? And the answer is probably not from a starting role. And then there's a club that really wants his services. And then how do we leverage that with getting a player in Sam Junqua for us, especially as we head into this really congested start of the season. And so it just worked out. Again, you're right, Spence. Even not from a fan perspective, but from a coaching perspective, I'd love to have all of these guys every year. But the truth is that you got to move on quickly, and you got to give all your energy and your love to the guys that are currently here. So Anderson was an amazing person, amazing teammate, and one hell of a goal scorer. And now we just got to find a new way. And so that's, I think when you're asking me as far as something for the fan base, it's like the excitement of new players and new heroes on this RSL team are waiting to be, discovered. And we have a really, really young group. And I'm excited about what I've seen in 2 weeks. These guys are hungry. These guys want to have a name like Chicho and these top players, and they're working so hard every day to get there. And what I've seen in the first couple games, I think the fans should be excited about these new players that are going to now headline this RSL team.
All right, I'm going to reset a question, Pablo. Do not move. I don't know if you're walking around, but we're getting a little cell phone action here on the show. So Pablo Mastroeni is our guest, the head coach of RSL, discussing the departures of Chicho Arango, Matt Crooks, Anderson Julio, and others. Gavin Beavers has been loaned to a Dutch club. Zach McMath is having surgery, which means there's going to be a new keeper. So let's go back there, Pablo. Let's head on to the back line. Let's talk about your plans in goal. Rafael Cabral, I believe he's a 35-year-old keeper who has quite a pedigree when you dig into the experience that he has had throughout his career. As I said, Gavin has been transferred on. I don't know why Zach waited to have surgery, but I'm not going to ask you that because I don't want you to put that's just me talking out loud. So what's the plan now in goal? As you and I discussed last year, there were just way too many mistakes and moments that weren't up to par.
Yeah, no, we felt like that was a position that we wanted to fortify for sure. And Rafa is a player, like you said, with a lot of experience, has won a title in Italy, has won a title in Brazil, has represented the Brazilian national team for a few caps. So he comes in with a great footballing pedigree. But I would say the one thing that really strikes me as really important to our group is his level of professionalism, and the way he holds himself accountable every day has been infectious with our group. So from a leadership standpoint, he has been, more than what we thought we were getting with a very good goalkeeper. So you combine, a need to reinforce the goal with leadership qualities, and that's who we have in Rafa Cabral.
So obviously, Chicho leaves behind a lot of things you've got to figure out how to make up for goals when he's right. He also leaves behind the captain's armband. Who have we landed on a decision as of now? Who's going to wear that armband this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few players. I'll just and I had a conversation with the guys regarding this role, right, in the staff leadership group and within that group. But I would say three names of guys that I feel comfortable representing, that not only I feel comfortable, but that the player themselves feel comfortable doing that. And that's Emeka Nelly, Justin Glad, and Rafa Cabral. And I would our guys don't feel like they have to change their personality to wear it, because oftentimes, especially with younger players, they feel like they have to do something different when they're the captain. And the truth is, you got the armband because of what you do every day anyhow. And I think these three guys are three guys in the group. So yet to determine exactly who that is, but really comfortable with the three of those players.
All right, we'll move over to players you have on the roster that will be expected to do a lot. And, Diego Luna has endeared himself to all those nerds that love the U.S. men's national team now, Sam's Army or whatever. He's like their cult hero because he broke his nose and he's awesome. But we know what he can do when given the opportunity to show his skill. And I would imagine, we'll start with Diego and then kind of go down the list. I would imagine you're asking Diego to even take another step up with the departures of a lot of the other attacking players, yeah?
Yeah, and naturally that's going to happen. When there's a void to be filled, it's going to be filled. And when you have a player like Diego Luna, I think it's the right type of player at the right time in his career to take that next step up.
All right, let's move over because we didn't get to see a lot of, we saw some of the summer signings, but I would imagine one of the Hello?
Hello?
Are you there? Do we have you? Can we hear you?
Yep, I can hear you. Can
All
you
right.
hear me?
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead and finish your answer. You're just cutting in and out.
Okay. No, I was just saying that Diego Luna's been excelling on both sides of the ball and leading by example. And I think, with every national team appearance, the level of belief in your ability increases exponentially. Again, being one of the top players in this country, and now, having the type of year he had last year, carrying the load offensively, working his tail off defensively for the group, and then showing a bit of, real, just grit and busting his nose and staying in the game and asking to stay in the game. And then what we found out later is that it's going to be some time before Diego gets back on the field due to the severity of the injury. But again, if there's one guy that can overcome that and really step in with great energy and fill the void that guys like Chicho see, left behind, I believe Diego Luna is one of the key guys for our group.
Bringing players into the summer transfer window at times can be complicated because you don't have a training camp with them. So let's talk about some of the players that we saw snapshots of, and let's go to Diego Gonçalves, who is I believe, the only DP on your roster, which, in my opinion, that needs to change. But what have you seen from him since you've now been able to have him on the ground for a preseason, and what sort of role are you expecting him to fill this year?
Yeah, we'll continue to play with two number 10s, Diego Luna coming in off the left and Diego coming in off the right. He's been bright in this preseason. And one of the things that you can actually hear his voice getting muffled by the pressure of the games down the stretch that we need to whilst he's adapting to a new team in a new country. But he's more visible off the field, on the field. He's doing some really good stuff, some link play, scoring some goals in training. And so I think the preseason, I think it allows the players to feel comfortable with their teammates as opposed to a new guy coming in and then having to produce. So I think it just takes a little bit of pressure off of Diego so that he can settle in with the team. And I think he's done a really good job at this point of doing that. And like I said, for me, it's more the the off the field stuff where I see he's comfortable with the group, and then when it translates onto the field, you can see him expressing himself in a way that he didn't have the opportunity to do last year.
Dominic Markzuk, it feels like he is the player that most are very excited about based off of moments last year, so, snapshots last year. So same question, now that you've had him for the final portion of last season, preseason now, what are you expecting from him this year?
Yeah, I don't know if you know, Spence, but he left to an under-21 national team in Poland last year in December. And one of the first team players on the full national team got injured, and they brought him up for the game against Portugal. And they subbed him in late in the game, and he scored a goal, his first goal with the full Polish national team. And so, he's come into preseason with that chip on his shoulder, scored a great goal against New York City the other day, and continues to impress. And, my biggest fear is that teams are going to start calling for him come the summer transfer window, and that's how good he's been playing with a ton of confidence, making plays on both sides of the ball. And now he's scoring a ton of goals in training. So I think it's a matter of time before we lose him to a bigger club, but we're going to definitely we're going to need him and hopefully keep him for as long as we can.
You're loaded in that, I'll just call it like central holding mid area with Ojeda in addition to Emeka. And then Pablo Ruiz, is he healthy now? Is he ready? And how are you going to handle, and it's obviously good to have depth because the calendar's so stacked, but that's a position of strength for you, yeah?
Yeah, no, it really is. And to be fair, the guys have been really, really good. I think in Pablo's game, tempering expectations for me and for him and making sure that we bring him along in a way that is conducive to not getting upset because, again, he's been out of football for a year and a half. And I think it's, because we have such a good core of midfielders, in the campaign, it'll be utilizing Pablo in a more game state type of situation. So up a goal, down a goal, what players can we utilize in this type of, like, I don't want to say rotation because, again, I think what was really strong for our group last year was Ojeda and Emeka locking down the middle of the field. So that chemistry is really important. But because we have Nelson Palacio, we have Noah Kauskin, and we have Pablo Ruiz, it's really critical that we find a good mechanism to express the depth that we have, but also to build chemistry. And I think that's going to be the tricky part. But Pablo's been really good in preseason. But he played 60 minutes today, did a good job. But again, I think the tempo of play, we got to continue to increase that. Because again, these are preseason games, and they're not the fastest rhythm games, and that's something that he's going to have to adapt to as he continues on. But again, he's been doing really good in this preseason, and the expectation is that we're going to have difficult decisions to make as a coaching staff in terms of the middle of the field.
All right, before I set you loose, let you get back to it, I'll leave you with a two-parter about your attacking group, namely your strikers and your forwards. I don't know a thing about any of them, Pablo. I'll learn about them as I watch you coach them, watch them for RSL. But talk about the group you have that will be tasked to replace the strikers that have left. And then attendant to that question is, I reference you have one DP. Are reinforcements potentially on the way?
Spence, you there?
Yeah, I got you. You got us?
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, we're in Santa Barbara, so the cloud moves over. I hear you, I lose service, and then it moves beyond, and I hear you perfectly.
All right, I'll just ask it very simply. Who's scoring goals for you this year?
Okay. So we got two guys in camp, Ari Pule and Forster Ajaga, two really young players, 21 and 20. And I would say the biggest thing, Spence, and the way I look at it and the way I process this is like last year there was oftentimes with DP players because they're attacking players are creative, oftentimes they don't take on the best positions for the team because they need the ball and just because they need the ball and is like our game model has been expressed in its entirety this preseason because the forwards are doing exactly what's being asked, if that makes sense. And so both forwards have had really good opportunities in front of goal. Today, Forster scored an amazing goal. Already had 2 or 3 good chances in the first half today, and then he had a couple chances against New York City. So I feel like it's going to be different than it was last year. It's not leaning on one player to score goals. It's expecting guys and Diogo to have more space to operate between the lines, because our forwards are always keeping the defense higher up the field. Where last year we had Chicho dropping in a lot, and oftentimes clogged the middle of the field, but he found himself in good positions. This year it's a little different, where our 10s are getting a lot of chances on goal because our 9 is occupying the highest line. And so, the way I look at it is they're going to come by committee, right? And I feel like if we get the forwards doing a good job and being in right areas, they're going to have chances, but they're also going to contribute to opening up space for guys like Diogo and Diego Luna to score goals as well.
All right, my guy. Well, I appreciate the time. We made it despite the cell phone issues. So enjoy Santa Barbara, and we'll chat when you get back on the ground, okay?
Sounds great, Spence. Appreciate it, bud. Take care.
Right. Pablo Mastroeni, head coach of RSL. Real Salt Lake just completed their second preseason match. It was a tie, 1-1. So appreciate Pablo's time. I don't know anything about any of these young strikers. I'm not going to pretend like I do. So we'll see how they're able to traverse this space, losing a ton of production from a year ago. RSL has a CONCACAF match coming up in just a matter of weeks. February the 19th will be their first CONCACAF match. Then they go, they start on the road. They'll be back home on Saturday, February the 22nd. And then their first league match is Saturday, March 1st against Seattle. So the season is right around the corner. Appreciate Pablo's time. All right, we'll catch a break. The Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight. They're taking on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Penguins here in Salt Lake City. That's a 7:30 first puck drop. I said tip earlier, my bad. So Neil Smith stops by. We'll recap the Utah Utes win over Cincinnati with Sean Mooney. Then we'll do some college and pro football with Aaron Schatz. Wednesday show, halfway through that work week, one day closer to the weekend. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. We got Sean Mooney rolling by. Sean was on the call last night for the Utah men's basketball win over Cincinnati. BYU got a win over Baylor last night. Good game down in Provo. We'll bring on Aaron Schatz for a little college and pro football, but let's do a little hockey on a Wednesday. Our guy Neil Smith, former general manager of the Rangers, the Islanders, worked for the Red Wings as well, now doing a little podcasting and helping us become smarter about the game of hockey. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. I got to see your mom and dad on the weekend, not under nice circumstances, but at least I got to see them.
Oh yes, Maggie's funeral. Man, she was the best. May she rest in peace. Did you work with her? I mean, nobody out here knows what we're talking about, but you worked with her.
Yes, from 1989 on, so I knew her well.
Okay,
but I'm glad your dad got a hold of me and I was able to attend the service.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, she was the best. Certainly very, very special to our family. Anyway, moving on. Random question, Neil, right out of the gate. So, it was a random, I think, like Thursday night of last week. I was kind of flipping back and forth between some games, and I pulled up my Amazon Prime account, and I looked up documentaries, and for whatever reason, because I guess we're all being watched right now, and our phones know exactly what we're doing, one of the recommendations was a documentary called Tough Guy, the Bob Probert story. And so I fired it up. I watched the whole thing, and you are featured in it on a couple of different occasions because you were with the club when Bob was with that team. And I didn't really know anything about him. What sort of guy was he? What was that ride like for you to go on? I think at one point you had to get him out of some trouble, at least according to the documentary. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, several times. Bob was a troubled guy. He was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario. His dad was a Windsor cop, and Bob was a tough guy on the ice, but he also had his own demons in his head, and alcohol and other things got the best of him a lot of times. And he was as tough as nails. He could fight like crazy, and even in junior hockey, after we had drafted him and I would go and visit with him, he was just a monster in junior hockey. And then he came up and played on a line with Steve Yzerman and got a lot better skater. But he was just a feared guy in the league.
So I was curious because there were pieces of the documentary that talked about how he would do things like buying tickets for underprivileged kids who couldn't go to Red Wings games, and he did try to get out in the community and do some good things. When he was, in his right mind, it seems, according to the documentary, there was a good person in there somewhere. Is that your experience?
No. There definitely was a very good person in there and a guy. And I knew Bob well, both as a junior player, as an NHL player, and then I knew him personally post career. And he was always a good guy. He would do anything for anybody. He just, he got himself in some troubles, and I think the troubles came from the substances that he was, using, but meaning alcohol and drugs. But I think that he was genetically had that gene that can lead you to substances. So he had a heart of gold. He was a great teammate to all his teammates, and has a legacy in the league for sure.
I found it a fascinating. There's something about hockey documentaries. They make for great television. And what I did not know, Neil, because I only knew him as an enforcer, as a fighter, as somebody who would scrap. But he had 62 points in 1988, and he was a good player. He wasn't just a fighter, right? He had some skill, yeah?
He played on a line with Steve Yzerman. He had great hands.
Yeah.
Bobby had really good hands, meaning, he could stick handle, he could find the passing lane, he could do a lot of things. He was a good player as well. And those were the players in that day that were the most coveted. The guys like Cam Neely for Boston that were power forwards that could play the game but also stand up for their teammates.
It's pretty rare, at least in my experience or my understanding, that some of and we talked a little bit about this last week because our guy Liam O'Brien is kind of the enforcer out here, but he's not the most skilled of players. Isn't it pretty rare to have a real good combination of excellent skill, but also the guy that's going to go scrap with anybody?
Oh, it's very, very rare, very rare. And some of the time you didn't want Bobby getting into the penalty box for 5 minutes for fighting. You needed his hockey playing ability. There's guys in the league now that have both things going for them. Brad Marchand in Boston, the captain of the Bruins, is a tough little guy that can go both ways, meaning he can fight and he can also score and he can hurt you physically or he can hurt you on the scoreboard. Those guys, yeah, they're coveted guys in the NHL.
Last thing, and then we'll move on to some Utah Hockey Club and some modern day NHL conversation. The opening scene of that documentary was Bob fighting Ty Domi. That looked like a mismatch. How tall was Ty Domi? That did not look like a fair fight to me.
No, it wasn't, because Domi was crazy, and Domi wanted to fight Bob because he wanted to. He had no fear whatsoever. Now Bob was about 6'3" to 6'4". Ty is about 5'9", but he was as tough as you can ever imagine. Ty Domi holds the record for the most fighting majors in the NHL history, and that'll never be broken now because we don't have as much fighting as they used to have. But that was all incited by Domi. He wanted to fight Bob Probert and prove that he was the toughest guy.
Didn't go well for our guy Ty, I'll tell you that much. He got his face smashed. What you referenced not as many fights in the modern day, and also after watching that documentary, it also appears that the fights that do happen are broken up a lot quicker. I mean, some of those Probert fights, he is just smashing some dude in the head, in the face for a long, long time. What are some of the changes they've made as far as trying to curb the fighting but maintain it, because it does appear like it's kind of in the DNA of the sport?
Well, the reason it's in the DNA is because there's so many dirty things that you can do in hockey when you're holding a stick and skating at 25 miles an hour that at some point you just snap. And because of, if you get run from behind into the boards, for example, or if you get high-sticked in the face or elbowed in the jaw when the referee doesn't see it, or something that really makes you snap. That's why it's in there and is not an expulsion but only a penalty. The reason it's gone down is because we changed the rules, and the skill level is so much higher now, and you can't afford to have guys on your team that don't have any skill, that only can do that. So that gets rid of it. The other thing that's lessened it is the shields. Everybody after a certain date has to wear a shield, meaning if you were born after, I forget what year it is, you have to wear a shield. And there's only about 5 guys in the league now that don't have a shield on, and because they were grandfathered in. So, it's not fun punching a plastic shield. And so that's why the fighting is much more rare than it used to be.
We oftentimes in pro basketball compare eras about, the tough guys in the NBA in the 90s and how the players are soft now because they don't play, and the rule changes that have allowed more offensive freedom and have certainly got in the, you can't hand check the way that those teams in the 90s did, namely the New York Knicks, who, the example of the physicality in the NBA that David Stern didn't necessarily love because it wasn't a aesthetically pleasing offensive team. Nonetheless, are there any similarities, like as far as the way the game is played now, juxtaposed to when you were building teams in the 90s? Do you like the modern day NHL, or do you prefer the way it was once upon a time?
You know what? I think that you've got to adapt to today. Dinosaurs didn't adapt to the environment, so they went extinct, and I don't want to be a dinosaur. So, I mean, I like the game today. I'm proud of the game the way it used to be, but I like the game today because you do have so much skill in this game. I mean, the players shoot the puck harder, they skate faster, the goalies are bigger. The goalies today are 6'4", 5'6", and they just get as big as they can and block the net. Whereas in the old days, you had to use your reflexes more because you were smaller and the puck hurt more than it does now. So everything improves, and the equipment in hockey has improved. The ice surface has improved. The sticks have improved, and the game has improved. To be honest with you, these guys are so fast and have such a high skill level that you got to admire them.
All right, we'll move over to some storylines going on right now. And, Neil, I try not to be redundant with you on a weekly basis about the Utah Hockey Club, but it's just the same thing. They lose 3 straight, then they win 3 straight. Now they've lost 2. They've got the Penguins in town tonight. Before we get to the Penguins, a couple of really good wins. They beat Winnipeg, the best team in the Central, 5-2. And then Nemelka had his first shutout of the year at Minnesota, 4-0. Then they get smoked by Winnipeg 5-2. They lose to Ottawa 3-1. Before we get to tonight, just your thoughts on yet another 7-8 game stretch where it's just up and then it's down, then it's up, then it's down.
You know what, Spence? The whole league is like that. And when I really mean that. You take the Colorado Avalanche. Let's just use them as an example. They go into Madison Square Garden on Sunday in the afternoon, and they're losing a game, and all of a sudden they end up winning it in the last minute. So they beat the Rangers, a tough opponent in the Garden, and they've won that game. Now they play 2 nights later, last night against the Islanders. They can't get the puck past Sorokin, and they lose. And nobody would ever think that the Colorado Avalanche would lose to the Islanders. And so it's going on all over the place. Last night you had a number of upsets in the league. So there's no certain things. It's like when Utah beats Winnipeg. Winnipeg's, as you've said many times on the show, is one of the very, very top teams in the league, and Utah was able to beat them 5-2. Minnesota's drastically improved over last year, and here's Utah's able to beat them 4-0. But then they get spanked by Winnipeg, which they probably should when you think about how good Winnipeg is. But then Ottawa comes in, who's a team that's pretty equal with Utah. They're a bubble team on the other side in the East, and yet they're able to, in Ottawa, they're able to beat Utah. So there's no sure things here. It's just it goes game by game. But Spence, I did some homework before coming on with you because I really wanted to see what this would tell us. And so what I did was I went back and looked at the standings on January 29th, 2024 to compare them to the standings on January 29th, 2025 today. And here's the comparison for Utah. Utah Hockey Club has played 49 games. They've won 21 and lost 21. And gotten 7 games that they've lost in either overtime or a shootout for 49 points. So at this time last year, on this day, they had 49 points. When they were called the Arizona Coyotes last year, on this day, they had played 48 games. They'd won 23. They'd lost 22. They'd only lost 3 games in overtime or shootout. And guess what? They had 49 points.
Oh, wow.
So it's exactly the same. And the goals for and against are almost the same. The difference between this team this year and last year's team, this year Utah at home is 8-11-4. Last year Arizona at home was 15-9-0. And they weren't good on the road. And this Utah team is good on the road. So I guess what I'm trying to look at is, have they, where are they as opposed to last year? And they're right about where they were at this time last year.
That could be spun, Neil, as a negative for a team that's trying to take a step forward, right? I mean, if you're kind of in the same place you were a year ago, does that indicate maybe the progress we were hoping to see is not manifested yet?
I don't think so, and here's why. And I'm not trying to be a cheerleader. If you remember, when the news got out that the team might sell and move to Utah, Arizona went into a spiral downwards. They lost a ton of games. You can check this out on the calendar. There isn't going to be any news of this team, the Utah team, any kind of news that's going to shake up their locker room. That's going to say, like, oh my goodness, we're maybe leaving here in a couple of months. What are we doing? That's not going to happen. So I think you're going to end up with a better outcome this year than they did last year when they missed the playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs because I've been saying all year that I thought that they would be fighting, and right now they're fighting. They're just behind Vancouver, Calgary, and of course Colorado. So they've got to jump over Vancouver and Calgary, which is what a lot of teams in the league have to do. They have to jump a couple teams, but they're in the conversation about being in the wild card. And last year, as I said, the difference is that they went on that spiral downwards in the last third of the season.
Some really interesting perspective. Let me just follow up. And again, you don't have to be a cheerleader to tell it how it is. So, if we're kind of at the same point that this team was a year ago with the point total through the similar calendar, do you feel like what you've seen from them does indicate that Coach Torney and Bill Armstrong and this group are moving in the right direction? Have you seen positive movement in the direction they would like to go?
I have because I've looked at individual players' growth and players that have come on, and I can see that the future is brighter now than it was a year ago. When I spoke before, it was just sort of about this season. Now, if you're a betting man right now, you're not going to bet on Utah to make the playoffs, because if you look at last season, teams that were in the position that Utah's in right now didn't end up making the playoffs. That's just factually true. That's not an opinion. But I do like where the club and the player personnel is headed, and I think that they have a good future in front of them. And it's not like as if we thought or expected, and when we came on before the season started and said, oh, yeah, they're a playoff team. We never really said that. We said that they would be in the fight and in the conversation to make the wild card, and that's where they are.
A player I have not asked you about, and he's been making some headlines recently because he's played really well, and Coach Torney has decided to make some line changes. Jack McBain is going to be the center on the third line between Michael Carcone, and Lawson Krause. He has 10 goals, 5 assists, 15 points through 49 games, and he leads the team with 167 hits. I mean, he's kind of been like this unsung hero, and we talk a lot about the top shelf guys like Clayton Keller and others, but what are your thoughts on kind of this unsung hero McBain, what he's brought to the club?
I think he's best known out in the East because unfortunately it was him that locked legs with Alexander Ovechkin and put Ovechkin on the shelf for a while. And I remember all the nasty things on social media about McBain. So his name is certainly familiar because of that. I think his game is improved drastically, and he is an unsung hero in Utah. He's not noticed as much because, Clayton Keller gets a lot of the notice and Gunther and others that are young rising stars. But I think McBain is having a really good year, and he's developing really nicely for Coach Torney.
Reference that Vejmelka had his first shutout of the season against the Wild. It's his 6th shutout of his career. Connor Ingram returned early January, and Coach Torney was asked about the dynamic of splitting time with the two of them, and he said this, quote, "There's no rotation. We go one game at a time with who we think is the right guy for that night. It can be opponent, recent performance, communication with our goalie coach, related with past performance against certain teams." What do you make of that approach where it's not going with the hot goalie, it's let's just figure out what the night needs?
Well, I think that is going with the hot goalie. I think that is going with who we think can beat this team coming up. And, yes, the old model is one guy is a definite number one, the other guy is a definite number two. In this case, I don't think Connor Ingram has really grabbed the gauntlet the way that people expected him to, and then he was injured for a while. So I think, and Vejmelka has probably played better than expectations. So they got two guys that are 1A and 1B, and they'll figure it out. They'll play their way up or down, these two guys. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the approach of saying, you know what, we're playing Pittsburgh tonight. We're going to play Vejmelka because we just feel like he's ready. He's showing it in practice. The goalie coach thinks he's psychologically in a good spot, and we're going to play him. And then against Columbus 2 days later, they'll probably go back to Ingram. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach.
How many, and I'm honestly asking to ask, how many teams in pro hockey, just generally speaking, you don't have to give me an exact number, approach it this way, where they have two goalies they like a lot, as opposed to the one guy they know that they want in net every night?
Not a lot, to be honest with you, not a lot, but there's been some very good teams that have searched to find who's going to be number one on our team. Vegas Golden Knights won the Cup a couple of years ago with no clear-cut number one. Edmonton Oilers have struggled to find out if Skinner came up as their number one eventually, but that took a while. Colorado Avalanche, who is a great team, they won the Cup 3 years ago. They got rid of both their goalies during the season this year, and now have two new ones. They got Wedgwood and Blackwood are their two goalies. So it isn't an approach a lot of teams take because it's so clear cut that there is one guy that's better, and when it's clear cut, then it goes into the old model of, this guy's number one and the other guy's number two, and the players all accept that because they can see it as well.
Blue Line's getting healthier. Tell us about Nick DeSimone. He's a new player here, but he's a vet in the league. I think they snagged him from New Jersey off waivers. Tell us about the new defenseman out this way.
Yeah, Nick DeSimone has been in the league for a while. I'm going to, while I'm talking to you, pull up his career so that I can tell you a little bit more about him. I believe that they got him from New Jersey. I think you're right on that.
Yeah, it was New Jersey.
Yeah, it came from, and let's see here. He's an American kid from Amherst. He's played in, he was in Calgary, and then he went to the Devils, and hasn't had a lot of time. He spent time in Utah. He's an up and down guy. He's 30 years of age already, so it's not like he's not Sergachev. That's for sure. He's a guy that they've picked up because they've got the injuries, and they're going to give him a chance. And Spence, I go to all the Islander games, and in the island they've had some injuries to Dobson and others, and they went out and signed Tony DeAngelo, a guy that was playing in Russia, and then now they've just signed Peronovich from or they traded for him from St. Louis, who hadn't been playing much for them in an attempt to fill that gap. So I think that what happens is when you get injuries, defense is a very hard position to play, and you need as many defensemen as you can get your hands on that can play in your six. And they probably just want to give Nick a chance to come in and see if he's can be a 6 or a 7.
So you referenced, needing a bevy, a number of defensemen. I wanted to ask you about a pair that we haven't seen much together, but I think we're about to see it because, of course, John Marino was injured, and then he came back, and Mikhail Sergachev, he got hurt, and he missed Utah's latest 3-game road trip. But what we're hearing is they're now skating together on the first pair, and we might see them tonight against Pittsburgh, although Sergachev is game time. But talk about that pairing that it looks like Coach Torney wants to make his first choice, Mikhail Sergachev next to John Marino.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious if Marino's healthy that he's going to come in. He spent, years in both Pittsburgh and then in New Jersey and had pretty good years playing there. And Sergachev is your number one guy. He's your go-to guy. So I think that's going to be a good pair. Marino is less offensive than Sergachev. Sergachev takes more chances. I think that John Marino is more of more defensive-minded than offensive-minded. He played at Harvard, so he's got to be a smart guy too. So we'll see, though. But that's hopefully they can get them together.
All right, before I set you loose, as I referenced, the Penguins are in town tonight. The Pittsburgh Penguins are in town tonight. They're last in the Metropolitan Division, but they have 2 more points than the Utah Hockey Club. They've lost 3 straight. They've lost 4 of their last 5. And if you go back, they've actually lost 8 of their last 10. And if you go back further than that, they've been bad as of late, as I'm looking at they've lost a lot of games as of late. I think they have 3 wins in their last 12, 13 games. But, of course, like I said, it's a team that has more points than the team that plays here. So they're the opponent tonight. What do we need to watch out for?
Well, you got to watch 87. I mean, he's a treat to watch still 20 years into his career. Sidney Crosby's going to be a Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, if you're going to the game or you're watching on TV, keep your eyes peeled for 87 because he's an amazing player. Of course, I don't think Malkin is playing for them tonight. Evgeny Malkin, he's hurt. I think Eric Carlson will be playing number 65 on defense, and Letang, who's their 2 offensive defensemen. They've got some other good players, some other offensive weapons. Brian Rust is having a good year and is always involved. They've had their goaltending issues as well. I think Nedeljkovic is playing tonight for them. He's going to be the starter, but
they've had a very bad year on the road. They're 8-14-5 on the road. So this is a team that Utah could get some home points from and do some home cooking here against them. They are, just to give your listeners an indication, they have the worst plus minus in the league at -40, other than the San Jose Sharks. And that's pretty daunting when you think about it. They're -40, meaning 40 more goals have gone in their net than they've put in other people's nets. So there's a good opportunity for Utah. The thing that I worry about with Utah is they just got home from that trip, and sometimes when you come home off a trip, they were on a 3-game trip. You know, there's a lot to do at home, meaning your real home with your kids, with your wife, with your car, with things. And sometimes that first game back, you don't play so well because you've just gotten home. So we'll see. I'm anxious to see it tonight.
Where can our listeners go find that great podcast of yours, Neil?
It's NHL Wraparound, and find it on anywhere you get a podcast, on Apple, iHeart, Spotify, or YouTube if you want to see my ugly face. You can look on there. But we're having a lot of fun with it. We had this week, we've done Chico Resch, the color man for radio for the Devils, and Trip Tracy, the Carolina TV color analyst, was on and giving us a lot of insights into that blockbuster trade that they made with Colorado.
Very nice. Well, Neil, thank you for the time, sir. Glad you were able to catch up with Mom and Pop. And, yeah, she was the best. So saying goodbye to Maggie. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
Yeah, I look forward to it, Spence. Thank you.
Right. Great Neil Smith. Always appreciate his time. As he said, he has the new podcast, NHL Wraparound, if you're looking to learn a little bit more about the sport that's new to a lot of people here in our market. If you were a hockey player, would you be an enforcer? Would you be a Bob? So I don't know if you've ever there's something about hockey documentaries that I find fascinating. They're really, really interesting, gripping, and obviously when you're looking at the fighting stuff, like the I think it was the 30 for 30 on the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings, and that crazy rivalry they had where every single time they played, somebody was getting their heads kicked in.
Right.
The Bob Probert doc on Amazon Prime is worth your time. It's haunting. It's sad. But, man, those guys back in the day, when they would drop the gloves, that fight wasn't over till somebody was face down with blood on the ice. I mean, for those of you of a certain age, NHL, I believe it was Sega Genesis, 94. Oh, man, played that game like crazy. But it was the first hockey game where you could fight. And if you won, the other dude fell down to the ice and his head started bleeding out. It was absolutely horrible. If you were a hockey player, would you be an enforcer?
I don't know. I'd like to think so.
Maybe for charity?
But I'm not great on skates. So, like, you know, I can hold my own, but you get me out there on the ice, and all bets are off. I might not be able to stand on my feet if you blow in my direction.
If you're not good on skates, you shouldn't be fighting on skates.
You like hockey documentaries, though?
Yeah.
Have you seen – you may have memories of the Danbury Trashers.
Shout out to the Danbury Trashers. Danbury, Connecticut is about 25 miles from where I grew up.
That's why I was asking. It might have been early 2000s when that mob boss bought the team and gave it to his son.
Yes.
AJ. Shout out AJ Galante.
You watched it.
It is so awesome.
It's pretty wild. Was that an ESPN doc?
I can't remember, but there's a somewhat recent one on the Danbury Trashers. Worth your time.
You ever watch John Oliver's Sunday night HBO show?
Last week
tonight with John Oliver?
I did used to more consistently, but yeah.
He had a phenomenal beef with the city of Danbury, Connecticut. It was hilarious. By the way, talk about a genius. Like, I do this for a living, and I watch his show, and I'm in awe of how he can handle a teleprompter, how quick he is, how funny he is, how smart he is.
He's really good at doing that, and then, like, writing parts of it into the show. As you mentioned, his beef with the Danbury town, his I can't remember the bird, the Australian bird competition.
Oh, like Poo-Techie Techie.
Exactly. He's able to turn stuff like that into like truly viral content consistently. It's pretty impressive.
Did you see the bit he did on the Gov, our old Gov?
Which one, Spence? Because he has been featured on that show, and the state has been featured on that show. I want to say I don't know, like a dozen times.
I've only seen him go at our gov once since when our governor asked everybody to pray for rain.
Yeah.
And look, if you want to pray for rain, pray for rain. I'm not mad at you.
I mean, it may have worked because if everyone stopped praying the last 2 years, we're back on that trend. So
what about
I
this
guess
year?
Get back to it.
Do we need to start praying for snow? We haven't had any snow down
That's
here.
what I'm saying. The third lowest snow total in like trackable years. So we got to start praying again.
Are you saying that the folks around here have stopped praying for the weather?
Yeah.
So let's get on it. We're on YouTube. Pray for rain. Pray for snow. Let's get back on it. Anyway, John Oliver, phenomenal show. Hockey documentaries worth your time. And it's fun to learn more about the sport that now is here in the marketplace. I mean, we talked about this during Crosstalk yesterday, Porter. Like, if you were putting money on the team that plays in our market that's most likely to win something special, namely a national championship, an NBA title, MLS Cup, or Stanley Cup, the Utah Hockey Club would be the team you put the money on.
Ooh.
It would be.
I'm going RSL. I know that's, but they've been in contention with the head coach with several different rosters 2-3 different times now. So even though they're like in a weird spot, I still think they're, and the MLS not being, the top league in the world has something to do with this. But I'm going to RSL.
First of all, let me correct you so I don't get a text from Trey. It's not the MLS, it's MLS. Nothing drives Trey crazier. If it's, hey, the MLS is playing tonight, right? It's MLS.
Major League Soccer, baby.
It's not the Major League Soccer. It's Major League Soccer. The other MLS oddity that drives me nuts is you're not supposed to say, like, so when teams are playing for MLS Cup,
right,
and you're going to the event, you're not supposed to say, hey, are you going to MLS Cup? You're supposed to say, you going to Cup?
Oh, it's Cup.
I hate it. It used to drive me crazy.
That's insider stuff, though. I'm not privy to that, so I wouldn't go there.
Who's going to Cup this year? Like,
that's
up, Trey. It's annoying.
That's front office guy. That's exec talk.
It's also soccer guy, And I enjoy soccer. We cover it on the show, but I'm not soccer guy. Okay?
That's fair.
All right, we'll catch a break. Don't forget, we're going to break down Utah men, not men who live in Utah. We're going to break down
AlphaCon coming up.
Coming up next, we'll break down Utah men. We're going to talk about the Utah men's basketball team and their win over Cincinnati. Maybe we'll get into the men of Utah. I don't know. It's a Wednesday show, and January might get weird. I will not ask Sean Mooney about men in Utah. I'll ask him about the Utah men's. This has been a weird week. Utah men's basketball team getting a win over Cincinnati. And then Aaron Schatz stops by to talk some college and pro football. It's a drive on a Wednesday, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Well, we have a little bit of unexpected breaking news that I did not see. It broke about 10 minutes ago. Welcome back in. We're not going to break down Utah men, like my tease said, but we will talk about the University of Utah men's basketball team beating Cincinnati. With Sean Mooney coming up in a bit, Aaron Schatz stops by for college and pro football. But Greg Wisniewski from ESPN.com is breaking a little news that the Utah Hockey Club will not be moving forward with the name Yeti or Yetis as its team nickname, and will hold an in-arena fan vote to pick a new one. So this is just came down about 10 minutes ago. The team expects to announce a permanent name and identity before the 2025-2026 NHL season. The new fan vote comes after the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office rejected names and logos that the Utah Hockey Club had submitted for approval, in particular the Utah Yetis, which was widely assumed to be the franchise's eventual nickname. So, starting tonight, from what I'm reading, fans attending Utah's next 4 home games will have the opportunity to vote for 3 options using tablets stationed around the Delta Center. The team estimates that it could be upwards of 15,000 fans per game. So here are your new options. Option number 1, which is my preferred name, and I've been on this from the start, and I feel like I'm on an island, but my preferred name has actually made it to the end. And my preferred name is, wait for it, 3, 2, 1, the Utah Hockey Club. I like the name they have. I think it's classy. I like the logo. I like the color scheme. I think you can have a nice Utah HC hockey sweater. And it would be the first time in our state's history that we just haven't overthought it and come up with something extremely corny, like with 2 Z's, like we did forever. And you don't have to have something, and I know like the appeal of an abominable snowman or whatever it is for the Yetis is something that people like. I think the Utah Hockey Club is classy. I like the name, and I think it should stay. That's my opinion. So option number 1, the Utah Hockey Club. Option number 2 is now the Utah Mammoth. Option number 3 is the Utah Wasatch. And I've not heard that one before. So let's go through this for a little bit. So the Utah Hockey Club is option number 1. So if you're just joining us, a little bit of random breaking news is that the Utah Hockey Club has decided to move on, and their preferred name was the Yeti. And now that's no longer their preferred name because the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has rejected the names and the logos. So no more Yeti, and I'm celebrating here for that. Utah Hockey Club, option number 1. Okay. Utah Mammoth, option number 2. The Utah Mammoth nickname was one of 6 finalists from a fan vote held last year, along with the Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and the Utah Yeti. Ryan Smith went on the Pat McAfee show, revealing that the Mammoth had made the final options. And then the last one, the Utah Wasatch. And here's what Greg has to say, the writer for ESPN who's breaking the news. The Utah Wasatch, this is an entirely new option for Utah's team name, and it wasn't included in the initial 20 names presented to fans in a survey. It references the Wasatch Mountain Range in Utah, of course, known for its ski resorts. But the team acknowledges that it's basically a replacement for the Utah Yeti. The name will allow the team to use a mythical snow creature in the form of a Yeti as its mascot, according to Mike Mon of Smith Entertainment Group. So fans will vote on one of the 3 names and then 2 logos. There's one for the Utah Mammoth and one that would be used for either the Utah Hockey Club or the Utah Wasatch. Let's just eliminate that. That is awful. That features a Yeti-like mythical snow creature, which Mon said is known as the Mountain Defender logo internally. According to Mike Mon, this may not be the last fan vote. Can we just call it how it is? You're going to have a tablet, you're going to hit something, and they're going to pretend like they're counting it, and then they're just going to do what they want to do. That's always been the deal. I mean, ultimately, the final names, okay, so remember when they're like, hey, we're putting this up to a fan vote, okay? The final names were Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and Utah Yeti. And out of all of the quote-unquote finals that you voted for, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth in the mix. I don't know where Utah Wasatch is coming from. According to Smith Entertainment Group, it's a replacement for the Utah Yeti. So, Porter, I'll put it to you. We have 3 final options for the name of our hockey club. Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Wasatch. Where are you going?
Man.
Not awesome.
I got to be honest. I think the whole thing has been handled pretty clunky and pretty sloppily.
Wait, is Purple back?
I mean, and you can include the Jazz stuff too with the ongoing rebrand. Is that still going? Like,
yeah,
we're 3 years into this.
It's ever changing.
We're now a year into the hockey thing almost, and the team is still trying to figure out. And I know the actual acquirement of the club happened quickly. You thought you might get the team and the branding, so you weren't in a position to debut with a team name. So I understand the Utah Hockey Club being a thing, but we're now almost a full season into this thing, and you're, in air quotes, using the fan votes to continue through names that you haven't yet gone through the trademarking process for. So you're putting out official surveys with official names that you might not even legally be able to use. Starting point there, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Second point, you don't seem to actually be using the fan votes, even though you're saying so, because Utah Wasatch was not anywhere near the list of like 20 or 30 original fan votes. Also, are they talking about the mountain? What is that? What is the Utah Wasatch?
This piece, yes, it refers to the Wasatch Mountains.
The Utah Wasatch? You can't even use that in a sentence
it's
without.
So bad. That's so bad. According to this piece, the Utah Wasatch is basically a replacement for the Utah Yeti, because it sounds like one thing that our guys at Smith Entertainment Group are hell-bent on is creating a mythical snow creature in the form of a Yeti for their mascot. Sounds like, but hell, the Jazz mascot is a bear. You don't have to have the Utah Yeti as the name to have a mascot. The Phoenix Suns mascot has been a gorilla forever.
Right.
You don't like. My whole thing from the start has been Utah Hockey Club. I think it should be the Utah Hockey Club.
And I didn't agree with you necessarily back then, because I did think that if you go through the process and you narrow it down, you get a fun branding, you have a process that has some synergy, some continuity to it, some semblance of like organization and thought process to it, maybe you might wind on a good mascot, a good brand for your community, for everything around it. Now we're kind of just throwing stuff at the wall, and I don't know. None of it really is fitting for me, and I think first impressions are important. So now we're a year in, and we all know this is the Utah Hockey Club. So I kind of think that no matter what you call it next year, people are going to still be calling it the Utah Hockey Club. They're going to show up to Utah Hockey Club games. There's a big sign out front of the Delta Center. Of Delta Center.
No, we don't do that on the show. That's so dumb. We will. The resistance is 2 to 6 on ESPN 700. We're not doing that.
But you get what I'm saying here.
I do. I get exactly what you're saying.
Especially in a day and age when you are trying to, in your first year of being a professional franchise, you're trying to cement yourselves with a fan base, right? That's going to matter in 5 years, Spence. If you have people who feel like they are connected to a team, and you got to start at some point giving them an identity to be connected to, and we're still talking about that with the Jazz rebrand a little bit, much less the Utah Hockey Club that might be called the Mammoths or the Wasatch.
It will not be called the Wasatch. It can't be called the Wasatch. I hope not, at least. Now, look, to be fair here, I say this all the time. When a player goes through something for the first time, I kind of give a little space and say, all right, let's see how they react to having this obligation, this responsibility of being your starting center for the first time, or your lead scoring option in the playoffs for the first time, or a coach is coaching in the postseason for the first time. And I'll say the same thing about the Smith ownership group. This is their first go around, and if we're being honest, it has not been clean at all. And hopefully they can figure some things out, because the Jazz stuff where it's like, hey, here's our new colorway. Here you go. It's yellow, whatever it was, the black, the white, the yellow, and everybody hated it. And like 2 hours later, like, hey, can we get a purple mock-up, please? Oh, purple's back. It's like, no, you still are playing in these yellow pennies that look like you're a middle school team, which was a horrific look. And I think it's fair to say the way they've handled this has been very, very inconsistent and clunky, to say the least. It's the first go-around, okay? This is the first time they've been trying to figure it out. And I think it's fair to criticize a lot of it. I think Jazz fans are wondering when they're going to be good again. And this is just kind of the latest situation where they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And I'll repeat what I said before. Your vote is not going to count. This is a fun little exercise they're having you do, and then they're going to do whatever they want to do internally. Mike Mon continues. He says, this may or may not be the last fan vote. This may or may not be the last fan vote. There may be another round after this. But he did reiterate whatever the fans decide in these votes will be the name of the Utah team beginning next season. He said they submitted all 20 names on the initial survey to the patent office, but the biggest refusal was for Yeti or Yetis, because it was widely expected, even among Utah players, that Yeti or Yetis would eventually win out as the team name. We've heard people say it on the show. A couple of players have let it slip during media. So the patent office rejected a trademark application from the team for the Utah Yetis because of, quote, likelihood of confusion for consumers to other companies and brands of the same name. Utah Hockey Club was seeking to use the Utah Yetis on a variety of clothing items. And according to the patent office, the database search turned up a number of third-party marks registered for use in connection with the same name or similar goods and or services of those both of the applicant, the registrant in this case. So among those parties, of course, Yeti Coolers LLC, which makes drinkware, coolers, and clothing. They do a great job. I have a couple of Yeti coolers. They're awesome. And according to Mike Mon, quote, we engaged deeply with the Yeti Cooler Company and worked with them over a process to see if there was some coexistence in an agreement that we can engage with them on. They have a unique and strong trademark on anything published Yeti or Yetis. We did not have a coexistence agreement with Yeti and therefore have decided to move on from that name. Well, this does bring to light some pieces of ambiguity that a lot of people assumed it was the Yetis, and that assumption appeared to be correct. So, yes, fan voting on the new name does begin tonight. Quote, unquote, air quotes, fan voting. Utah Hockey Club has always been my preferred name. We'll see what happens with the Utah Mammoth. The Utah Wasatch has now entered the equation. So, Porter, if it is the Utah Hockey Club, is it safe to say that I manifested it?
In some form, yeah.
New moon tonight. Got to manifest. Today's the day.
You have been speaking it into existence in some form or the other. So, yeah. And honestly, right now, I'm inching closer to agreeing with you. I wouldn't hate Mammoth just because I'm me and I like old silly creatures and dinosaurs and stuff. But
so you want a corny mascot. You want like a weird, big, abominable snowman type mascot.
Part of this is that I don't really want it. I don't really care. But like I said, you're building a fan base. You're building, you're building something not just for right now, but for 15, 20 years from now. And people my age, people your age, you build the in-game experience around that. You build the media coverage around people my age. You build the mascot and the sideshow stuff around kids who are in the arena, kids who are going to be buying season tickets in 10 years, in 15 years. And for that reason, I think a Mammoth would be cool. I think a Yeti would be fine. But again, at this point, there's more synergy around Utah Hockey Club. You have a logo, you have a brand, and it looks pretty good. Honestly, like it's clean. So I might be with you at this point.
My prediction, not my preference, is that it will be the Utah Mammoths.
Okay.
That's my prediction, not my preference.
Not the
Utah
Wasatch?
No, like run the release by a few folks before you hit send. Because it's to your point, it's another bad look. It's another scenario where they're caught reacting and not acting prior to. And then, they're left looking around kind of like, what's next? What do we do? And I'll repeat what I said. This is the first go-around. Porter makes a good point. This turnaround for our market to get a hockey team was unprecedented. We had the commissioner on the radio show, and Gary Bettman told us that the first conversation he had with Ryan about this was in March. And they had the club on the ground within 6 or 7 weeks. Like, that's an amazing accomplishment. I'm not diminishing it. But whether it's the clunky Jazz rebrand, whether it's some of the in-game stuff, and now this situation with trying to name the hockey club and, again, reacting and not acting, I think it's fair to be critical of some things with this ownership group that didn't seem to exist prior to the acquisition when the Millers were the stewards for a number of years. But anyway, there it is. Some random breaking news on a Wednesday. Starting tonight, hockey fans, you're going to have the option to vote on 3 names for the hockey team that plays their hockey in Salt Lake City at the Delta Center. The Delta Center tonight is where you go for the game. The Delta Center it's not the barn.
You're going to get an email about that.
I don't give a rip. Go ahead. So the 3 names that you can vote on starting tonight: Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, or Utah Wasatch. Time now to enter to win tickets to the University of Utah men's basketball home game. Text Utes right now to 33986. Text Utes to 33986. Chance to win tickets to go see the Runnin' Utes. Speaking of the Runnin' Utes, coming up on the other side, Sean Mooney stops by. He is on the Utah men's basketball call with our guy Bill Riley. We'll break down the win last night. We'll look ahead to the Big 12 schedule that lies ahead for Utah. Then we're going to bring in Aaron Schatz to talk either college or pro football. We'll do a little bit of both in the 4 o'clock hour. So keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, in case you missed it, a little bit earlier, some breaking news via a ESPN hockey writer named Greg Wyshynski. It will not be the Utah Yetis. Praise the dear Lord. Will not be the Utah Yetis. Our Utah Hockey Club has whittled it down to, where have you heard this before? 3 finalists that you get a vote on. Breaking news, you don't. But the Utah Hockey Club, the Utah Mammoth, and the Utah Wasatch are your final 3. Starting tonight, as the Pittsburgh Penguins are in town, you'll have a chance to vote. You won't, but they're going to pretend like you do. So, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Wasatch. There it is, breaking news on a Wednesday. Sean Mooney, college basketball analyst for the University of Utah men's basketball team, just hung up on me. Sean.
He did.
That was
I'll
rude.
dial it.
I was ready to give him this really kind, nice intro, and he just slams the phone down. And who, by the way, has a dial tone when they hang up anymore? Is Sean on a landline? What is this, 1985? I mean, aren't we all on cell phones? Yeah, it's still there. Sean Mooney uses, I wonder if he has a rotary phone. Like one of the, all the younger listeners who are vaping right now have no idea what I'm talking about. When's the last time you got hung up on like that where there's a dial tone? See if we can get Sean Mooney back on.
Yeah, he might have one of those, you were mentioning it, those rolly phones.
Yeah, the
with
rotary phones, yeah.
The dial.
You know, there was a day and age, kids, when your phone rang and you were actually excited about it at the house. Like you're at the house, the phone rings, you're like, oh, maybe it's somebody really fun, really cool, a family member or friend. Now the phone rings and it's like, I don't know anybody who calls me anymore. But Sean Mooney on a Wednesday. Sean, are you there, my friend?
I'm here, Spence. I'm so sorry, man. It totally cut out right when you asked me. How are you? I'm going to vote for the Mammoth. I'm voting for the Mammoth, even though I don't get a vote.
Fair enough. Well, if you go to the game, you get a vote. No, you don't. But they're going to pretend like you do. I gotta ask you this right out. Like, when you hung up on us, we heard a dial tone. Are you on a landline?
No, I'm on my cell, but I'm at my work, and this coverage here is bad. I've been out in the parking lot, so.
Okay. Fair enough.
Here.
Sean,
I'm here. I'm not on a rotary, I swear. Even though I'm from Ogden, you would think I would have a rotary. I don't have one.
you're an O-Town guy.
Yeah, brother. Absolutely. I'm not Northeast High School. I heard about your Marcus Camby experience. I listened to the Kim Pomeroy interview. Very good interview, by the way.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it was 47-10 at halftime. It didn't go well, Sean. So when I watch Utah play against a team like Houston, I just feel bad for them because I know what that's like.
You do. And did you hear what Jay Billis said on national media about Utah playing Houston?
What did he say?
He said it was like clubbing baby Sills.
Oh, ouch.
I about died when I heard it. I'm like, come on, Billis. It did appear like that a little bit. It was ugly.
It was. Now, you were a very good player, but did you ever run into a situation where you're like, yep, I've reached my level. I cannot play this game anymore if those guys are going to play like that?
Yeah, absolutely. But it was after college, and like my strength as a player was I was a good defender, good rebounder, and I was actually playing against a kid in the Mill Creek Pro-Am who played at St. Mary's that I actually trained. So I'm a personal fitness trainer, Spence, you know that. And he went for like 38 on me, and I'm maybe 34, and that was it. I went home and I told Christina, that's it, I'm done.
Well, you made it to 34. Right? I mean, it's a lot longer than most of us.
I feel pretty good about that. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, it's better than being 16, going to 5-star basketball camp and just staring across, and suddenly it's. Do you remember Shamgod Wells?
Oh, yes, of course I remember him.
Like, come on, man. I could not. The drill was one-on-one. You just have to get to half court, and then you have to try to stop the player from getting to half court. He picked me 3 times. I called home. I'm like, so I guess I'll lean into broadcasting or something because this isn't going to work.
You know what? I mean, listen, if you're going to be put out by someone at 16, that's someone to be put out by. Spence, there's nothing to shake a stick at right there. You shouldn't feel bad at all.
No, fair enough. You made me feel better, but it just was depressing because when you're young, you're dumb, and you think you're going to be the starting point guard for the Knicks.
You do. You have no idea, right? That life in reality hits harder sometimes than you want it to.
For sure. All right. Before we get to the game last night in a vacuum, let's analyze Utah basketball through 20 games now. 20 games in the season, 4-5 in conference play. When they win, what do they do well? When they lose, what stalls and goes wrong?
Yeah, so obviously when we turn it over, we even turned it over last night, right? And it's so frustrating because our team understands that people are turning our turnovers into easy buckets. That's been the case all league long. So that's on both sides. Typically, when we win, we shoot it a little bit better. We shot it well last night against a team, Cincinnati, who's, well known for their defense. Obviously, BYU did the same thing, put up 11 for 15 from the three. We are not doing that, but we shoot it well when we win, and we turn it over too much when we lose.
Okay, well, that's a formula certainly when it comes to college basketball that will dictate wins and losses. So let's get over. Let's get over to last night. You know what? No, let's not get it to last night because I haven't talked to you. I haven't talked to you since the BYU game, and I wanted to kick the tires with you on because I was there. My dad, my brother, and my little niece. We all went up, and I got to tell you, Sean. I'm looking around, and I ran into some college friends of mine at the game, and we all said the same thing, like, man, this feels like when we were here, when Rick was the coach, and when we planned our weeks around, Utah basketball games. So let's start with that atmosphere, and Craig himself saying after the game, Sean, fans impact winning. And I guess it's not realistic to expect it's going to be like that every night because it hasn't been like that since. But what did you make of the crowd, the atmosphere for Utah BYU, last Saturday?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming and bringing everybody. And we agree, both Bill and I agree. I got to be down there on the floor for part of that in the early 90s, and it was never a game when it wasn't packed like that. The energy was always like that. Just the must section alone, you saw it. It was all the way to the rafters. But I think there's always so much intrigue between BYU and Utah. We know that. We understand this environment. It's always going to be good. The game almost always is going to be good. I heard Ken Pomeroy predicted we'd win by one. I mean, come on, that's crazy. I think that game just brings out arguably the joy of what our state used to be. And really, I've got to give BYU credit because I think it's there. I think they still have packed houses. Salt Lake may have too much to do. I don't know. Ken pointed that out. But it was really fun, and we want to get back there. But I do think that the product has to be NCAA tournament level, maybe to get fans back in the stands. What do you think, Spence?
Well, it's interesting, Sean, because if you go back over the history since Rick left the program, Giacoletti had a good team. I mean, obviously Rick recruited Bogut. We know that. But Jim had a couple of pretty good teams. The Luka Dircha, Luke Neville team, I think that was an NCAA tournament team. And Larry had two or three really good teams. And for whatever reason, ever since Rick has left, the attendance has been as inconsistent as the play. Like even when Ray or Jim or Larry had some decent teams, I was at a lot of those games and the fans just weren't. It honestly is baffling to me. I don't have an answer to it because it can't be like, hey, we're a football school now. Well, now football's over. You can go to a basketball game. Like that doesn't jive with me. And so if Craig's able to build this thing up in the Big 12 you referenced the Ken Pomeroy interview. When he dropped like, hey, if you can make this tournament of every 5 years, I just kind of went, oh. But maybe, I'm spoiled because those teams that you played on and you were around, they didn't just go to the tournament every year. They made runs. They went to Final Fours. They almost won national championships. So, yes, I agree with you that if the product was consistently NCAA tournament worthy, maybe more people would go. But it's kind of like I've landed on the space where I feel like if you're a member of the Utah community and you care about Utah basketball, maybe you need to do your part a little bit too and just go because you know this. If you're being recruited to play at a school and you show up to a home game and there's 1,500 people there, you're just like, no thanks. I want to play in front of fans. You know this, Sean. Players want to play in front of fans.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And it's been interesting, Spence, because as we travel around the Big 12, Baylor is a good example. They put it together a new modern field house, and it's 7,500. TCU has a field house at 7,500. That number may be kind of the ticket. I'm not saying change the Huntsman Center, but they're filling those up well, and the fans were loud and crazy. And even for our fans, Spence, if we get 7,500 and 9,500, that's lower bowl, and that's a good crowd and can be really loud.
I agree with you. Don't change the Huntsman Center. I mean, it's historic. We are such an underrated basketball market. I mean, we're the home of the highest rated basketball game in the history of pro basketball. That's Jordan's last game against the Jazz. Huntsman Center, we could talk for hours about the history, but Magic and Bird, right? I mean, So don't change the Huntsman Center. I will say I think the building could use a little love.
Yes. I don't disagree. In particular, one of the thoughts that I think I would say that administration has tossed around, and I'm not speaking for them, I've just heard this, is trying to create an atmosphere that's a little more party-like, and meaning, where you go get the hot dogs in the Crimson Club room, maybe you create some kind of connection with a local eatery and a local distillery or brewery. And I know this is a taboo subject to some extent, but if we could sell beer, there's an outside chance that would bring more fans. I'm just saying out loud.
100%. And maybe let's not have hot dogs that taste like they were Costco's throwaways from April. Thank
you.
I'm sorry, man. The concession situation is subpar. I walked by and this poor young lady was selling like granola and water set up on like a table that looked like she brought from home. And they just need to update the facilities. Now, it's probably tough because if they are going over their budgets and they're talking about, okay, well, we're not bringing in enough revenue with ticket rip and merch and food and beverage, whatever. And Mark and his group have a lot of budgetary decisions to make. And, of course, the football program brings in the revenue, so you're going to invest in the football program. And we should say those basketball facilities are very, very nice. But the Huntsman Center itself, Sean, I just think needs to be a bit modernized is all.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, and you're spot on, Spence. You understand what you're talking about. I mean, it's easy for me to say this is how we should do it. I'm not the one in charge of the finances or the ledger, and they do have a lot on their plate. I agree 100% with that. I also think that, any business owner, and they're business owners in essence, you sometimes have to figure out a new approach and maybe a new marketing style in order to make a product that people do want to come. And your points are well made, I think, about just revitalizing what we have.
Tell me what the feedback is, because, the funny thing about doing this job, the job that I do every day, talking on air for 4 hours to our community, is oftentimes I do share feedback from simply my ecosystem, my prism, my echo chamber, which honestly is probably my 20 or 15, 10 or 15, 20 best friends from college who love Utah, and they'll hear me talking about something on the show, and they'll call me later or text me later like, hey, this is the way I feel about Coach Witt. This is the way I feel about the basketball program. This is and so I'm fully acknowledging it's not an accurate representation of everybody who loves Utah athletics, but in your ecosystem, the people that you surround yourself with, and we have some mutual friends. I'll give Brad Bruce a shout out because he texts me every time you're on the show. What is the feedback you hear about Utah basketball? What do they say? Are people still invested, or are they kind of tapped out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, and you're making a really good point. We do have our own, echo chambers, and obviously mine includes, like yours, people who really care about Utah basketball, which I love, and they're all invested in. I think they're all in that same kind of vein where over the years they have stopped attending games as much, and for various reasons. And these are people that they don't die, they bleed red. They give their heart and soul to the program. And I think your point is well made. Maybe we need to revitalize that in some way. But I think people are frustrated. I think they want our team to go to the NCAA tournament, and that is a fine desire. I want that as well. And I don't like the 2 out of 5 years, Spence. I want 5 out of 5 years. I mean, I don't want it to be unrealistic, but I want roster construction, and I want our Utah basketball to be meaningful again. I'm not saying it's not right now, but I want it to be meaningful like that for us, our chambers, and other people outside us.
Well, and it's a good point, and I think the truth of the matter is right now it's not meaningless, but it doesn't mean to the community what it meant to us. And you can't sell nostalgia forever. But my experience up there as a student was colored through the prism of Keith Van Horn in WAC tournaments hitting game winners. It was watching Keith be the number 2 overall pick. It was Final Four experiences. It was Andre Miller. It was Mike Doliak. It was Britton Johnson. It was a Red Bull away from winning a national championship because they just ran out of gas. And so because of that experience, Sean, I walk into that building and it means something to me. And but it's different because I don't know how many young Utah fans walk into the Huntsman Center and have the same meaning, right? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, I couldn't. I'm the right person to be having this discussion with because I feel the exact same way. The legacy that was left for us as athletes in that Utah basketball era is very strong, and we all are connected and will forever be connected through that legacy. And whether or not you liked Majerus' style, there were certainly things he said that were inappropriate, unexcusable, but his genius for what he did and what he represented in terms of just basketball became a part of who we all are. And every time we walk into that Huntsman Center, every time I walk into the Huntsman Center, I have a sense of pride and community and joy. And I want that to be something for these young kids, just like you do. I want that exact same thing to exist for the kids that are growing up and watching the athletes now.
I so badly wish there was some sort of medical technology, science technology, just to bring Rick back, to have him react to like the modern day and age of social media and cancel culture and players on their phone at halftime. Like, how do you think he would handle what college athletics is today?
I mean, like, it's either Rick's way or the highway. And so I do think, I listen to Kelvin Sampson. I think Kelvin Sampson is a good example of a coach that's a little bit like Rick. He demands the same level of attention to detail. You have to be assignment sound. He said it in his presser, Spence. And this can happen in today's modern day because it's happening. Kelvin Sampson is an example of it. I think Nate Oates does it, but Kelvin Sampson said, kids want to come to our program. They want to be a part of who we are. That is definitely something that Rick, I think, would still elicit, as long as he did some of the dumb things he had and or didn't acknowledge that he said some of those dumb things.
Yeah,
I think he'd survive.
Yeah, and to your point, his brilliance would allow him to survive if he was able to adjust to the modern day and age, because strictly as a tactician, as an X's and O's guy, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think he gave his life to basketball. I think it actually may have cost him his life, right? Because that's...
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's no question. That's exactly right. I mean, we would say, Spence, that 95% of what he thought about was basketball and 5% was food.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not even trying to be funny, because that was kind of the deal. And I know he had friends here or there. I know he had relationships here or there. But if you talk to people that really knew him, that's all he wanted to do. He wanted to coach. He wanted to watch tape. He wanted to grab some pizza. That was kind of his deal.
Those were they. And it was legit. It's just who he was, and like he had a great coaching staff when I was there. And to some extent, I think coach's head grew just a little bit, and it kind of got things out of whack. I think personally, after the 98 game, after the national championship game, he maybe should have moved on. I'm glad that he didn't, but I think it was probably time. He was a builder through and through, and maybe it's harder to sustain. That's my take looking back at it.
I don't know what this says about me, but living in a Marriott with room service sounds really nice. I think I could do that. I'm not going to lie.
No, I could totally do it. Just you and I would be more couth. We're not going to, show up without our clothes on when we open the door. We wouldn't. I mean, Spence, I'm speaking for myself. I'm just assuming. Now, we may be dancing when the door opens, but that's a different story.
I can commit to wearing pants. Sean, for sure.
Thank you. I can too.
Hey, so tell me, what do you think Craig is pitching? What do what is the recruiting pitch right now? Because ultimately, the bottom line is this. I think Craig's a really good coach, and I think he's a really good man, and I'm cheering hard for him. I just think more often than not, they're still not entering gyms with the same talent level as most of their opponents. He's got to get dudes. He's got to get horses. How does he do it? What's his pitch to come play at Utah?
Yeah, I mean, I think his pitch is his personality. I agree with you. I really like Craig. It's been really fun working with him. He's genuine. He doesn't pull punches. He says what he means to us in particular. You're going to get some coach speak from coaches like in post-game interviews, that kind of stuff, because there's so much emotion. I think he pitches togetherness. I think one of his big things is community and trying to create that community. The big emphasis with this team was actually trying to be connected. They may not be more talented or as talented as some of the Big 12, but they wanted to be connected. And I think you're still seeing that. You're seeing a team that's connected, even though there's some players that aren't playing as much, and that's going to always happen in a season.
All right, before we set you loose, let's talk about the game last night. It was a good one, and Cincinnati preseason top 25. They're 2-7 in conference, but man, do they guard, and they make it hard. And I thought the Utes did a good job for the most part of staying poised, knocking down some free throws. There was untimely turnovers for sure. But ultimately, I want your thoughts. Let's start here. We'll do a couple things. There's a lot to like about Keanu Doss, and it seems like he's been in and out of the rotation, but strictly from an athlete standpoint, physicality, explosive standpoint, feels like there's a home for him. You know, Ezra had some foul trouble last night, but what do you make of this continuing kind of project that Craig is going through to try to figure out the lineup and the rotation he wants to land on?
Yeah, you heard me when I said about Keanu Doss. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I really like Keanu Doss. He came in, he had 12-9. My favorite thing about Keanu, Craig said this, he's young. But one of the things he does really well, if you notice, Spence, is he finishes around the rim with great concentration.
Yep.
He doesn't struggle when he gets around the rim, and he made some really tough shots last night, but it's his rebounding. I love his rebounding. You can't put a price tag on that. And then Ez, man, I'll tell you what, when Ez gets going, it's hard to stop him, and he got it going early. And then he had this situation where he got that technical, and he kind of got in his own head and just made some kind of lazy passes. And, it's not my position where you bring him back in, but he did get it going. And when they went to Ez as the 5, and Coach alluded to this last night, we're pretty hard to defend because Keanu Doss is more like a guard, really, than he is a big, and he cuts well and he finishes well. So I like them both. And I think you're going to see more of that. Lawson is doing a great job. We're running our offense through him, but it's hard on him, and they're starting to put more pressure on him on those DHOs, the dribble handoffs and the handoffs and the passes. So you may see us go small more in our lineup.
Give me a thought on Gabe, because the easy thing that people point to is like, wait, he's a shooter that has horrible shooting percentages. I continue to point out, if you're watching games, that teams are just simply selling out on him. And Utah's success, in my opinion, moving forward will be, can Hunter Erickson knock down some shots based off of the gravity? Can Mike or whoever it is, Ezra, can Jake knock down some threes? So for Ute fans that have been critical on their most important offensive player, what's your current take on Gabe Madsen?
First of all, it was really nice to see Gabe hit that first 3. Bill and I are just as invested as you, and we really want him to have success. And, man, for any fan out there that wants to come and try and play against a Big 12 team where you're the number one person they want to stop, good luck. That's all I'm going to say. Last night, Gabe Madsen did a great job with Lawson. I don't know if you noticed the 2-man game that they had. They had really good action, and it was effective, in particular against Cincinnati and the way they played those on-ball screens. But then Gabe Madsen hits the big curl to a jump shot, 15-foot jump shot, and makes the free throws. Gabe's our guy. He's not Brandon Carlson. Brandon Carlson was 7 feet tall, could post up, demanded a double. Gabe doesn't post up, doesn't demand a double, but Gabe demands doubles on the outside. And we're starting to use him more effectively, I think. And I think he's going to continue to have better and better game, Spence, as we move into the second half of Big 12 play.
All right, Sean, before I set you loose, it's interesting to look at it like this. Okay, so they get the win last night against Cincinnati, and now the next 4, you're at Oklahoma State, you're home against Colorado, you're at West Virginia, you're at Cincinnati. So the road stuff in the Big 12 is going to be tough no matter who it is. However, after that, that's when it's Kansas, that's when it's K-State. Like, it gets really, really tough after the next 4 games. So I know you want them to win every game, but over the next 4, what should Ute fans be looking for before the schedule gets extremely difficult?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, Oklahoma State, we've got to win at TCU. I think TCU is a better team than Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State doesn't shoot it as well. I think we have a legitimate chance to go in there and still win. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think we can. We need to out-rebound that team. They're a very good rebounding team. We did a good job on their big guy, Bugatti. Hopefully we can continue to do that and then play them as drivers and cut them off and wall them up defensively. And then Colorado is we should beat them at home. That's just the reality. They're not as good this year. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we come out of this on a 3-game winning streak. And then, of course, I think Kansas comes to town.
Yes, indeed, and that will be quite the test. Sean, thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it, and we'll get you back on soon. Be well, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Have a good afternoon.
All right, Sean Mooney. One of the nicest dudes, man. He always puts me in a good mood. Appreciate his time. All right, ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. It's time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text 1000 right now to 508-777-1000. That's 1000 to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us at ESPN 700. All right, Aaron Schatz will stop by. Going to do some college and pro football with Aaron coming up on the other side. But new year, new you, new budget. Save money on your wireless, on your internet, on your cable with great offers from our friends at the Dish Pros. Your job is to pick up the phone and dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much as always. I am so excited about the additional tools that Dish just dropped in my lap. They sent out about 60,000 mailers just recently to individual people, and it's a pre-qual. You're already qualified to get set up, and it has a pretty big, fat gift card in it. But what happens to most people is they probably don't look at their junk mail and they throw it away. Just a plain white envelope says Dish on it. But, guys, this offer is fantastic, and we have a lot of customers that do open them and they take advantage of it and come by our office. But I was given a tool where I can actually look up and see if you received one of those recently and then just go ahead and add it to your account. Guys, this goes on top of the amazing Dish offer where the price is guaranteed for 2 years. Huge credits. It's now cheaper than YouTube, Fubo, and clearly cheaper than DirecTV and cable. Call us up. This is where we have saved people thousands. Customer of the day, about $4,000 over the next couple years. We help them with their wireless, their home phone, and also their internet and TV. Guys, lots of different offers out there, but we get the best price, and we'll find the best deal. And here's the one thing that's normal. Everybody's raising their prices. So if your price is the same or just a little bit more than what Dish is right now, imagine what it's going to be in a year or a year and a half. Dish will still be the same if you get set up with us, but every one of those has gone up, including even Netflix. But I'll tell you what, I have a reprieve for Netflix. If you call and get set up with Dish right now, I'll get you Netflix, the ad-free version, free for the next 2 years. This is worth more than $431. Customers get it, and this is such a neat little extra offer we can hook you up with. Call us up, take the upgrade. It's free money. Put it in your pocket. Enjoy it. Get access to all the content you want, streaming and regular TV with the biggest, fastest DVR out there. Call 424-DISH. Call us now, 801-424-3474.
There he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Little college and pro football coming up next with Aaron Schatz. Move over to the 5 o'clock hour of the program on a Wednesday afternoon. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight, taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. In case you missed the breaking news from about 1 hour ago, Utah Hockey Club has moved on from what was their preferred name of the Utah Yetis. And starting tonight, as a fan, they're going to pretend that you get to vote on 3 options. Option 1 is the Utah Hockey Club, the name that they have now. Option 2 is the Utah Mammoth. Option 3 is a new one. It's the Utah Wasatch. We'll get back to that coming up in a little bit, but let's do a little football with Aaron Schatz on the program on a Wednesday afternoon. Aaron, happy Wednesday. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate your time. So whenever I interview somebody for the first time, and I've been doing this for 20 years now, I've never had an opportunity to interview you. I just like to get to know them a little bit. I was reviewing your socials after Porter informed me you were going to join us. So let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us about yourself. How'd you get into this gig, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, I have been doing football analytics for over 20 years. I founded a site called Football Outsiders, which no longer exists. Now I work for FTN Fantasy, and I'm known for my DVOA stats, which look at every single play and adjust them based on a league average baseline of situation and opponent to analyze where teams have strengths and weaknesses going into the Super Bowl.
Translation, you're very smart, and the rest of us just watch football. So how'd you get into it? Are you just a lifelong football fan, just fascinated by the game?
Yeah, basically just had some questions and nobody was answering them. And there were all these baseball analytics sites and nobody was doing football. And so I was like, I'm going to try to answer some questions. And so I put together a database of the 2002 season and started creating stats. Now I have a database with every season from 1978 to 2024.
Wow. Well, very nuanced. Well, you should know I'm a New York Football Jets fan, so I'm a long-suffering NFL fan. I do not want to know what your data says about the Jets at all, but I am wondering what your take is on the new head coach, the new hire, and what they do with their starting quarterback, and if you can give me any hope for being a Jets fan moving forward.
I mean, I like Glenn as a hire. I think people like him as a sort of leader of men. I think what he was able to do to motivate the Detroit defense, despite all of the injuries that they had, was very good. I think that Rodgers is a locker room cancer and that he's not very good anymore as a quarterback. Like, he's a very average quarterback, and you can get average quarterback performance without that kind of personality. So I would move on.
Well said. I am with you. All right, let's before we get to your thoughts on the Super Bowl, let's dig into the conference championship games. And I actually want to start with a question about the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, who we had out here in the Pac-12 footprint before he transferred to LSU. He was a ASU kid, and I remember watching him play and thinking he was pretty exciting, but I never thought he would be doing this at the doorstep of history. But the Eagles smoke him. But before we get to the game, what do your numbers say about just how special he was year one and how Commanders fans should feel about their future with him under center?
We have it as the 4th most valuable rookie quarterback season since 1978, and I think Washington fans should feel very good about him going forward. Now, what you can't do is look at what he did this year and go, well, everybody's better in their second year, so he's going to just be better next year. Because the fact is, most quarterbacks who are this good as rookies don't get better in their second year because they're already this good. Like, there are exceptions, like Marino, but he's an exception. However, I think you can pretty much feel that Daniels is going to be this good. And this good is pretty good. Definitely a top 8 quarterback in the league this year. And that's pretty darn good for a rookie.
All right. Actually, you know what? Let's move over to the Eagles specifically before we talk about kind of the matchup. And I would be curious to get your take as a guy that digs into the data, because for me, all year long, I seem to have heard, watched, read a lot of people that were very skeptical about Philly's ability to do anything special this year. And without knowing your data, I just have adamantly disagreed based off the talent at their disposal. It seems like there's a lot of questions about their head coach. Seems like there's a lot of questions about their quarterback. But here they are back in the Super Bowl. What's your data say about this Eagles team?
Well, I think that the skepticism was warranted because of the way that team collapsed last year. I mean, despite having all of the talent, they were not as good as their record, and then over the last few games completely collapsed. So the skepticism was warranted. But since October, they've been fantastic. They're the best defense in the league this year. That's the big thing, has been the step forward on defense. I know people want to talk about Saquon Barkley all the time, but the big thing has been a huge step forward with a defense that has stars on every level and guys who had huge breakout seasons on every level of the defense, with Vic Fangio running the show. That's the reason they're in the Super Bowl.
So how did they dismantle the Commanders the way they did? I thought Philly would win, but I thought it would be close, and Vegas agreed. I think the line was 6. What stood out most to you about the way they just blew their brakes off?
The Commanders had a bad defense. Like, going into that game, of the 4 teams that were left, there was one unit that was bad, and that was the Washington defense, and that's what we saw. The Washington defense is not good. And so the Eagles scored a bunch of points on them. They didn't, their defense did a good job of keeping Jaden Daniels down. Obviously, stripping the ball 3 times is pretty good, right? The Washington fumbled 3 times. But the big issue is just that the Washington defense was just not good. Jaden Daniels is good. The defense, not so much.
So what's your data say on Jalen Hurts as a quarterback?
He's been about 12th to 13th in passing this year. He's a little bit better than that when you consider his running ability. But the passing attack for Eagles, if people feel like it's not as powerful as other passing attacks in the league, they're right. Despite the presence of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, despite the offensive line, blocks well, it's not a great passing attack. What they have is a very good running attack, and like I said, the best defense in the league.
Is there a better 1-2 wide receiver punch than A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in pro football?
Jefferson and Addison is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Chase and Higgins is pretty good, but that's about to be broken up because Higgins is likely to go elsewhere. If you say that that's the best tandem in the league, I think that you've got a pretty good case.
You think Higgins ends up in Washington? Maybe give Jaden another weapon?
I think that that's possible, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a team with a lot of cap room that wants to sign him. There's a lot of talk about New England trying to blow everybody else out of the water with a big offer.
Okay. Moving over to the AFC Championship game, let me start with, I know what we're all supposed to do as media members. Josh Allen will never win the big one because Patrick Mahomes is Michael Jordan. But what's your take on the Bills side of this? I'm a child of the Northeast that lived there in the 90s. I very much remember those 4 Super Bowl appearances, just heartbreaking for a very passionate fan base and a very great football market. So what do the numbers say about the Bills this year and your projection on Josh Allen the rest of the way?
They were a very good team this year. They were a better team this year than Kansas City during the regular season. Not in this game, though. Kansas City was a much better team in this game because there were 5 fumbles in this game. And something you have to understand is that fumble recovery is essentially random. And Buffalo recovered all 5 fumbles, which is ridiculous. That is very lucky. And without that, Kansas City wins by a larger amount. I understand why it's so heartbreaking, right? All the games have been close as far as the score. They can't seem to get past Kansas City. That's how Indianapolis fans felt. And then 2006 came, and they had a big comeback, and they finally beat the Patriots. The day will come where somebody beats the Chiefs. The Chiefs are not going to win the next 12 straight Super Bowls. This is not the Celtics of the 60s. Somebody will beat them. It will happen. In fact, somebody who beats them might be the Philadelphia Eagles.
And we will get there, but before we do, since we're talking Josh Allen, Equal Time says I'm supposed to, as a member of the media, ask you about Lamar Jackson, who every time he loses a game in the postseason has to deal with a media news cycle of, this dude will never get it done either. What do your numbers say about Lamar, and do you think he'll eventually break through?
Lamar had an absolutely fantastic season. He had one of the 10 best quarterback seasons that I've ever measured this year. And he played better in the playoffs than he has in the past. But he went up against a very good Bills team. The Ravens and Bills were both really good teams. And the fact that the Ravens lost by 2 points on the road to another good team that's not a face plant, right? Like, sometimes if you're a really good team and you play another really good team and you're in their building, you're going to lose by 2 points. It doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean you can't win the big one. Again, history in all sports is filled with players who, quote unquote, could not win in the playoffs until the year they actually did, whether it's Barry Bonds or Jason Tatum or Peyton Manning or a number of other players.
So we do have a couple of local angles, Aaron, that I want to kick the tires on. And I'll just ask you this. What's fair to say about that final play, 4th and 5, where Josh somehow was able to get the pass off, and our guy Dalton Kincaid, former Ute, just was not able to make the play? I think it's really easy to knock on him, but every replay indicates he had to change course. He had to. It was going to be a difficult catch. Now, I'm sure Dalton himself will say, I got to get that done, but what's fair to say about that final play?
I don't consider it a drop. I'm one of the people who feels like that's a difficult play. He had to switch his inertia. He's going one direction. The ball is in the other direction. He has to switch his inertia and then dive to catch it. It would have been great if he had caught it. That would have been great, but I don't think that you can expect that he's going to catch that ball. It's a difficult catch to make.
We also had a local boy get his first career start in a postseason, period. But it was a playoff game as Cole Bishop stepped in for Taylor Rapp. How'd you analyze the way Cole handled himself in a very, very pressure-packed situation?
I mean, you went into that game feeling like the injuries in the secondary were going to be a problem for the Bills. You didn't come out of it thinking Cole Bishop was the problem. You came out of it thinking Kaiir Elam was the problem. So I think Bishop did pretty well for his first NFL start. Kaiir Elam, not so much.
Good to hear that. Cole's a great kid, man, friend of the show, so we cheer for him. All right, it's easy for me to say as an observer that the Chiefs have built this incredible dynasty and have been able to adjust and adapt, and they win in a myriad of different ways, and a lot of it now is Steve Spagnuolo and defensively, and, of course, Patrick Mahomes, when he burst on the scene, was Tyreek Hill in his prime, Travis Kelce in his prime, and it was super fun to watch. And maybe it's not as aesthetically pleasing, but they're still winning at an incredibly high clip. How have they been able to do this from your prism, and how have they adjusted and changed with the times?
I mean, some of it is a little bit of luck. I mean, going 15-2 this year was a little bit of luck. But they do turn it on. They do play better in the playoffs. Spagnuolo is a great play designer on defense. I mean, if you look at what he did to the Patriots when he was with the Giants, combined with what he's done to teams when he's with the Chiefs, he's probably going to eventually be in the Hall of Fame as an assistant coach. Mahomes, so here's the thing. Most quarterbacks, when you are in situations where passes are expected, play worse, which makes sense. Because if the defense knows a pass is coming, they're going to play against the pass. You're not going to be as good. Mahomes is better in those situations than he is usually, which is kind of crazy. Like, if you know a pass is coming, you still can't stop him, and that's what's special about him.
All right, let's move over to this matchup. It's Philly, it's KC, Super Bowl 59, rematch of Super Bowl 57. KC is slight favorite. Let's start here. Okay, let's do it a couple of different ways. Philadelphia wins Super Bowl 59 if what?
If their defense clamps down. I mean, this is more than anything else. This is a battle of two defensive coordinators scheming against the other offense. Vic Fangio for Philadelphia and Steve Spagnuolo for Kansas City. And if Fangio's defense can somewhat limit Patrick Mahomes, and if Saquon Barkley can break a couple of those explosive runs against a Kansas City defense that does not give up a lot of explosive runs, then Philadelphia will take this home.
Kansas City, he gets the three-peat and makes history if what?
If Spagnuolo and his blitz packages get to Hurts, and the defense, the run defense, keeps Barkley somewhat contained, and Mahomes is Mahomes.
What do you think, Aaron, is going to happen? What's your prediction for Super Bowl 59?
I think it's going to be close. I think the Eagles have a better shot at this than a lot of people give them credit for, but I would pick the Chiefs, and here's what worries me. The offensive line injuries for the Eagles. The Chiefs are at their healthiest that they've been all year. While we don't know the status of Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens for the Eagles. And if one of those players is out and Tyler Steen has to go up against Chris Jones in the middle of that Kansas City defense, that is a problem. And that is enough to tip my pick to the Chiefs.
All right, before I set you loose, just out of curiosity, you're a smart guy. Wanted to kick the tires on a couple of storylines. Ben Johnson, namely, leaving Detroit to take over Chicago. I referenced the Pac-12 is dead, but for a while, Pac-12 footprint. So we saw Caleb up close. Utah had some good success against Caleb Williams when he was at Southern Cal. So how do you analyze Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback now, his rookie year behind him, and what do you think Ben Johnson can do as far as taking over that job?
Here's the problem. We know Ben Johnson is a great schemer and designer of plays, but can he fix the clock in Caleb Williams' head? Caleb Williams' biggest problem is taking sacks by holding on to the ball too long. And if Ben Johnson can't fix that, then Caleb Williams is going to be a subpar quarterback.
All right, let me kick the tires with you. We're not an NFL market, but due to our geographical location, we do have a lot of Denver Bronco fans here. And Bo Nix is another player who we had here playing Utah a number of different times, was up on the sidelines watching him play the Utes, and he picked him apart. I will admit to being skeptical when Sean Payton landed on Bo Nix as his choice, but they win 10 games his first year, and he looked pretty good. What do you think the future holds in Denver?
I also will admit to being skeptical of Bo Nix, especially early on in the season when it seemed like every pass he threw was behind the line of scrimmage. But they eventually did develop a deep passing game, and he had a pretty good rookie season. So I think that things look good for Bo Nix going forward. I think things look good for Denver going forward. It's possible that all the first-round quarterbacks from that draft are going to be at least average, which is kind of amazing because you saw the spark with Drake May and Caleb Williams. You saw what they could become. Penix was good in the 3 games, right? Jaden Daniels was awesome. Nix was very good. We don't know yet what we'll see from McCarthy, but that's a pretty good quarterback class.
All right, before I say you loose, because of their move now, via their location in Las Vegas, the Raiders are the closest team to us here in Salt Lake City. Pete Carroll to the Raiders. How do you think this works out? What do they need to add to give Pete a chance here?
The first thing I would say is that when I'm 74, I would like to be retired. I don't understand why he came back. My God, dude, rest. Enjoy the rest of your life. But, I mean, who's the quarterback? The problem here is who's the quarterback? It's not probably Aiden O'Connell. It's not probably Gardner Minshew. Are they going to bring in Russell Wilson because he's familiar with Carroll? You're just going to get average quarterback play with the same strengths and weaknesses that Wilson showed for Pittsburgh. It seems like such a hopeless organization in a division where the Chargers and Broncos look much better now, and the Chiefs are the Chiefs. It's not the best organization to be a fan of right now.
I would imagine, Aaron, your work is beneficial for folks that might want to, I don't know, maybe play a little daily fantasy or have a little fun with the Super Bowl. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Not only my stuff, the DVOA ratings at FTN Fantasy, but we have DFS optimizers and all kinds of picks. Stuff in other sports, too. People should check out ftnfantasy.com.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your time. It's been illuminating. Love to have you back on soon.
Absolutely, man, and everybody enjoy the Super Bowl.
All right, Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. He has I'm looking at his socials. He has a bevy of options at your disposal if you're interested in getting involved with some daily fantasy for the Super Bowl, or if you just want to learn more about the game. The links to all of his work up on his Twitter page. It's at @SchatzNFL is where you find him. He says he specializes in nuanced, ice-cold NFL takes. You can tell that he does a lot of work. I'll just leave it there. So check out his socials, Super Bowl 59. Less than 2 weeks away, Philly and Kansas City. So excited for that one. All right, before we launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program today, new year, new you, new budget, save some money. How about that? For yourself, for your family. Save up, go take a vacation, and you can save more than you realize with a couple of different options on your internet situation, your wireless situation, and what you're doing as far as watching TV. It's easier than you think. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Definitely. This is the easiest money you're going to make today. Pick up the phone and call us and take advantage of all the free stuff. Guys, these offers out here are basically, they're kind of just, well, not kind of, they're paying you to take advantage of the deals. And Dish has this new offer where you get Netflix free for the next 2 years. Now, if you didn't know, Netflix just did a price increase. Now the price went up. But you'll get the ad-free version for 2 users at a time, and that's worth like $431 plus. That it comes free when you get set up with Dish. Plus, you get the biggest DVR, auto hops commercials, auto records your games, auto records the local channels for you. Really some neat things there. Biggest DVR out there. Have full access to all your content on the Dish Anywhere app, including your DVR recordings. And guys, it's not expensive. In fact, YouTube TV with their latest rate increase and Fubo, it's the same price. But you get a better DVR, it's faster, and the price isn't going to go up. I can promise one thing, everything's going to keep going up. The prices are going to go more. In a couple of years, it'll be a lot more than what you're currently paying. So call us up today, upgrade. If you've got stuck in that cable bundle, guys, literally those are the best customers because you call us up and we can save you thousands. If you've got a massive rate increase in your internet or your internet's not working good, call us up. Take advantage of this. Get the free money. We'll set you up with dinner on us, have you installed for free. And also, if we'll search for additional offers. Dish sends out about 60,000 of these individual offers. And even if you didn't open your junk mail, you missed it, we'll find it. And if we find it, we'll hook you up with a big fat gift card on top of everything. Call us today, 424-DISH. Don't wait. Don't continue to overpay. Don't continue to be frustrated if your service isn't working. Get the most reliable service out there. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. We got 3 hours down. We got 1 hour to go on a Wednesday show. We'll get you halfway through your work week and one day closer to the weekend with the final hour of the drive. Coming up next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time on a Wednesday afternoon. It's been kind of a nice day, sunny and clear. Blue skies here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, right outside of our Broadway Media Studios. Yeah, about 38 degrees and sunny all day. Hopefully you got a little vitamin D, which is rare for a January day. We are about to turn our calendars to February, so congratulations to the group on that. We made it through. I want to tell you about my good friends at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. So here's the deal. Big game is almost here. It's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks. It is the best place to win cash while watching the game. Prize Picks is giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw for 1 yard for you to win that square. Now, it's important because you only need to win 2 squares to win up to 1,000 times your cash. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real money. Now, check out the promos tab to tail any of our Super Sweat Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promotional funds. So here's the deal. They're giving away free money. You guys should check it out if you want to do something fun for the big game, the final football game of the season. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, so if you missed the breaking news, it came down at about 3:30, 3:40 Mountain Time. The Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Sidney Crosby, legend, number 87. For those of you heading downtown to watch the game, definitely check him out. Hall of Famer, one of the best players of this generation for sure, probably top 10 or so all time. But that's not the most interesting, intriguing situation occurring at the Delta Center tonight as the Utah Hockey Club welcomes in Pittsburgh. What we learned is the Utah Hockey Club, this is according to Greg Wichnitsky, who covers the NHL for ESPN, the Utah Hockey Club will not be moving forward with the Yeti or the Yetis as its team nickname and will hold an in-arena fan vote to pick a new one. Now, they won't, but they're pretending like they will. The team expects to announce a permanent name and identity before the 2025-2026 NHL season. The new fan vote comes after the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office rejected names and logos that the Utah Hockey Club had submitted for approval, in particular the Utah Yetis, which was widely assumed to be the franchise's eventual nickname. So now we know that was their preference. That was kind of the rumor. I mean, a couple of the players actually spilled the beans in media availability. So here's what they're pretending to do. They're not really doing it, but they're going to pretend to do it. So fans attending the Utah Hockey Club's next 4 home games will have the opportunity to vote for 3 options using tablets stationed around the Delta Center. Team estimates that could be upwards of 15,000 fans per game. It's not, but that's what they're saying. So here are your name options. If you're heading down to watch the game tonight, there will be a tablet available, and you can go through this fake exercise of pretending to vote for one of the 3 names. Option number 1 is the Utah Hockey Club, the name that the team has right now. It was meant as a placeholder, according to this writer, and ultimately, according to what the release said from the club, quote, "It's always been our intention to let our season one identity as Utah Hockey Club, the team's performance, and the amazing response from our fans to hold the conversation through our inaugural season." That's Chris Armstrong, the team's president of hockey ops. So option 1, the Utah Hockey Club. Option number 2, the Utah Mammoth. This nickname was one of the 6 finalists from a fan vote. Well, it wasn't. Held last year along with the Utah Blizzard, the Utah Hockey Club, the Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and the Utah Yeti. Team owner Ryan Smith went on Pat McAfee's show and said that the Mammoth had made the final 4 options and the final option, just to prove that they're not really taking your vote seriously. It is the Utah Wasatch. That's the new one that has been presented today. The Utah Wasatch, according to Greg, the writer from ESPN.com, said this is an entirely new option for the Utah Hockey Club's team name. Of course it is, because it was not in the vote. It was not one of the quote-unquote finalists. So do you realize now that you're just going through the options so Qualtrics can get your information? Anyway, new option for the Utah team name was not included in the initial 20 names presented to the fans in the survey. It references Utah's Wasatch Mountain Range, known for its ski resorts. but the team acknowledges that it's basically a replacement for the Utah Yeti. The name, according to this report, will allow the team to use, quote, a mythical snow creature in the form of a Yeti as its mascot, according to Mike Mott of Smith Entertainment Group. So there you go. Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Wasatch. Those are the final three names. The Smith Entertainment Group said it went through extensive back and forth with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Biggest refusal was for Yeti or Yetis. And obviously that is because of Yeti Coolers LLC, which makes drinkware, coolers, and clothing. According to SCG, they engaged deeply with the Utah Yeti Cooler Company and worked with them over a process to see if there was some what's called coexistence agreements that we could engage with them on. Quote, they have a unique and strong trademark and anything published Yeti or Yetis. So they were not able to come to a coexistence agreement with the Yeti company and therefore have decided to move on. So there you go. Porter, let's reset this. I will remain steadfast in my opinion from the start of the process that the best name for the Utah Hockey Club is, wait for it, the Utah Hockey Club. Keep it. The colorways are cool. I'll give them credit. I think some of the sweaters look really great. I like the Utah across the front, and I like the HC just as a little acronym you can use on a sweater. I think it's classy. I think it's cool. I think they should stick with it. My guess is the winner will be Utah Mammoth. And I just can't imagine anyone voting for the Utah Wasatch. Where are you at with it today?
I think I'm falling in line with you, but I'm doing so because of the time that has elapsed and the lack of synergy, the lack of what seems like any sort of a plan here from Ryan Smith and co. And I like you said, I don't mean to kind of pour it on in that regard, but you know, this is on the heels of what was and maybe still is an ongoing rebrand with the Jazz. It's happening during a time where you aren't giving fans a winning product on either the hockey side or the basketball side to go and watch. And it's coming down to a point where I just think you got to have a name. You got to have a team that the community, the market can attach itself to and go from there. Because when you go back and forth, when you're giving fans the option to vote on names that you may or may not have legal rights to, you're kind of just, you're not really going through the process with a full intent on following through there. And it's just making stuff messy. It's making stuff, I feel like, a little bit clunky, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can give the fans maybe some input without it feeling now at this point, I think a little inauthentic, especially when you add in a name that wasn't part of the group that they voted on. Yeah, there were 20 names on there, and one of the three finalists wasn't on there at all. Like you mentioned, I think Ryan knows the value of having all of the info, all of the data from these people that are doing these surveys. He is a survey guy from Qualtrics. We knew this, but man, it does seem like the team, the business side of the Utah Hockey Club had an idea for what they were going to do and put that plan in place before going through the backroom legal necessities to actually execute that plan. And now we're seeing, because of that, a little bit of a messy fallout. And I hope that they can find the soft landing spot and a good brand, a good option. I think you can do it either way. The Utah Hockey Club, the Utah Mammoth, the Utah Wasatch. And listen, you know me. I spend all my time up in those Wasatch Mountains. I love it. It just doesn't sound like a cohesive name. So I'm not sure where that one comes from.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ryan's dad built a great software company. Qualtrics was built, and obviously, it's been able to provide a lot of wealth for that family based off of the software that his father developed. And it's been, let's see, I think it was 2020. It was October of 2020 since the Smith Entertainment Group, I guess it was just Ryan back then, and his wife Ashley purchased the Utah Jazz from the Millers. I believe it was 2022 where the Miller family sold most of its remaining shares, I think, over to Ryan and his partners. So we are approaching, 4.5 years since this transaction took place. And I think the only thing you can say about the results of they've been very mixed. There's no way you can brand the first 4.5 years of the Smith ownership of the Jazz as anything other than the jury is very much still out. I think there's a lot of things you can point to of very confusing decisions, very unorganized, operations. And then there are other things you can point to as miraculous accomplishments. The fact that they were able to even get a hockey club in the matter of just a number of months. Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, joined this show before he addressed the public and said the first conversation he had with Ryan about this thing was in March. They had it done within like 6 or 7 weeks. That's phenomenal. And I have a lot of friends over there. They're good people working hard, and they're drinking through a fire hose. I think some of them are being asked to do things that are, quite frankly, very unfair without additional compensation. This felt like hey, okay, now it's in front of us. Now we just got to figure it out. And as they've been trying to figure things out, they've been reactionary more than they've been prepared. The results for the basketball team since Ryan has decided to do this thing have been horrible. Is the hockey team getting better? I don't know. We had Neil Smith on earlier. At this point of the year, when the Utah Hockey Club was the Arizona Coyotes, they had 49 points, the same amount of points they have this year. It's a young team, and I understand what we're all supposed to say. Long game, draft picks. All right, it's a fan base when it comes to the Jazz that people are used to winning, and people are used to very quick pivots and rebuilds. And this rebuild has not been quick. The pivot has not been successful, and there's not a lot of hope anytime soon. So this is just the latest example of an ownership group that right now appears to be over their skis. It's the first time they've done this, and as I said earlier, I oftentimes talk about athletes who are asked to do things for the first time. Okay, you're a starting player in the NFL for the first time. It's your rookie year as a starting quarterback. Okay, this is your first playoff experience. For all of us, when you do something for the first time, there are going to be growing pains. There are going to be learning curves, and Ryan talks about the long game all the time. I believe in the long game, but sometimes it's also an excuse to say, but yeah, we're trash right now. But stick with us. And look, maybe in 5 or 6 years, the Jazz are awesome. The hockey club are awesome. The $1 billion that Ryan received from the government up here after threatening to leave down south, maybe that turns into something cool for the downtown. Hasn't been great. I just think it's fair to say, hey, these jerseys are yellow, but purple's back because we don't like them. All right. You elected to break down a really good Jazz team in the name of what? What we're doing here. Not your grandfather's Utah Jazz. Okay, what is it then? Exactly. Answer that question for us. I guess only time will tell. All right, other news of the day today that we've been kind of tracking. And, of course, we talked about Utah's win over Cincinnati last night. Sean Mooney will break that down for us coming up in a little bit. It was a fun night of college hoops last night. BYU had a really fun game against Baylor. A bunch of NBA scouts there to see Cannon Catchings, who looked awesome. That's the best Cannon has looked all year. Yegor Demon's kind of settling in. Baylor has a player in the Edgecombe kid who's a first-round prospect as well. Utah Jazz lost last night to the Golden State Warriors without Steph Curry. They've now lost 6 straight games. They're 10-35, second-worst record in pro basketball. They'll be back in action tomorrow against the Timberwolves. NBA action tonight. The ESPN has the coverage. We've got the Nuggets and the Knicks from the Garden. Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns. Games going on right now. Nets, Hornets, Pistons, Pacers, Raptors, Wizards, Bulls, Celtics, Cavs, Heat, Kings, Sixers, Mavericks, Pelicans, Clips, Spurs, T-Wolves, Suns. And the late game on ESPN is OKC at the Chase Center to take on San Francisco. So there you go. We've had a really, really busy show. RSL was in action earlier today with their preseason match number 2. Pablo Mastroeni stopped by, so we caught up with Pablo. As I referenced, Neil Smith rolled through to talk about the latest with the Utah Hockey Club and, of course, all things NHL. Aaron Schatz to break down some pro football. Super Bowl 59, less than 2 weeks away. So definitely appreciated Aaron's time. And we've had a really, really busy show on this All right, wrapping up the program for this Wednesday afternoon. Congratulations. You are now halfway through that work week. You are one day closer to the weekend. Thursday, basically the weekend. We award that to you as a listener of the show. And if you are a listener of the show, you're part of our family, so thank you for that. And fun sports weekend ahead, but Wednesday show, wrapping it up. Adam Silver gave a interview, went on a podcast today, and referenced the potential of limiting NBA quarters to 10 minutes instead of 12. Why are we just playing less game? Why are we playing less basketball? I'm actually fine with trimming the 82 game number, but 10-minute quarters, that is ridiculous for a sport right now that has an issue with players playing anyway. I don't know. So that kind of came down a little bit earlier. 10-minute quarters.
No.
Yeah.
I've done this before with you, and I always get pushback for it, but I would like to see the regular season of the NBA be a seeding only, maybe Christmas on, and then we get the meaningless basketball out of the way, and the best 30 teams in the world have a tournament in the spring. I know I'm not catching a bunch of folks with that one, but when we're talking about shortening quarters, we're talking about the Elam ending, we're talking about load management. Hey, how about just meaningful basketball? I don't know.
You're not wrong. Look, I know it will never happen. Promotion relegation would rule so hard for the sport. You'd have to play your tail off towards the end until the end of the season, because the promotion relegation setup in the Premiership, in the EPL, in European football, and English soccer is so financially punitive that if you are relegated, you're in danger of losing your team. Like, you're in danger of a business being run into the ground. And on the other side, if you are able to get relegation, your life changes. And it makes every match life or death down the stretch. Can you imagine actually caring about watching the Jazz T-Wolves tomorrow? Can you imagine? I mean, it would be, not to quote John Lennon, but can you imagine? It would be a wonderful thing if tomorrow we actually were able to do a radio show and talk to a fan base that was energized and juiced about a Jazz T-Wolves game because something actually did matter outside of trying to lose.
Yeah, and there's a way you can, in my opinion, there's a way you can do that without entirely forgetting about the draft and draft positioning, right? There are still ways, elimination as far as the big tournament goes, right? The onus should be on the league to give us a good product and good basketball. And I think that there are ways to do that don't exactly align with the bottom line of owners. And that's kind of where we're at.
All right, before we say goodnight, courtesy of our friends at the BBC, we're going to go over to Europe real quick. We're going to go over to the UK. A woman has pleaded guilty in the UK to the first ever cyber farting case.
Sorry, what?
Yep, cyber farting case. She's been, this is getting kind of cheeky here. She has been spanked with penalties after sending videos of herself farting to her boyfriend's ex.
I don't think that should be illegal. It's weird. Shouldn't be illegal.
Your pro farting video? Is that?
No.
Okay.
Just to be clear, no.
Okay.
But I don't think it crosses the boundary of the law. Unless you have a restraining order on specifically that thing.
The 25-year-old victim said the farting videos caused her distress and anxiety. Quote, she proceeds to pass gas by placing the camera on her bottom and passing the gas. Miss Evans passing wind, her face smiling at the camera. The victim said the booty belches made her feel unsafe in her own home. Quote, it was purely malicious. She was smirking throughout. She found it hilarious. This perpetrator must attend 15 rehabilitation sessions, 60 days of alcohol abstinence, and then undergo monitoring, 2-year restraining order following the cheek squirting stunt. She is no longer allowed to harass the victim.
So it sounds like there was previous harassment ongoing, which now I'm on board with.
Okay.
If it's just like if I were to maybe this weekend just lift the leg, film it, and send it to you.
No, I'm good.
I know, but it shouldn't necessarily result in criminal punishment.
That's
all I'm saying.
I would not want you arrested. I would be a little bit disgusted. But but the other thing is this: farts are always funny. A good fart is always funny. I'm sorry, it just is.
I'm not going to say always.
It hits pretty well.
Like this little radio booth.
Yeah, don't do it in there.
It's a microwave.
A well-timed booty belch, as the BBC put it, I think it always brings a smile to people's face. I think it's funny.
Yeah, there's a reason whoopee cushions are around.
Okay, well, that's how we're going to end our Wednesday show. Let's get out of here. Porter, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of this weird radio program?
On a Thursday edition of The Drive, we'll chat with Andy Larson, NBA, probably some RSL, probably some Utah Hockey Club, too. He was covering the name thing and has opinions about that, as we do. Scott Mitchell stops by the program, former NFL and Utah quarterback, talking some NFL playoffs and offseason college football. We're going to have a JP Chunga sighting in studio, the former producer of this here program. Some more NFL playoffs chatter probably as well, and we'll finish off the day with our friends from Sports Court, Handy and Handy, stopping by for legal stories in sports.
There we go. It'll be a fun Thursday program, and with that, we will say goodnight. And a special thank you to Pablo Mastroeni, Neil Smith, as well as Sean Mooney and Aaron Schatz. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, we had a little RSL, little Utah Hockey Club, little Jazz, little college basketball, and, of course, some NFL and college, too. Check out the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. That ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, if you are a listener and a fan, we're asking you to go to your preferred podcast catcher, look up The Drive with Spence Checketts, subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. If you have some time tonight, those things, we all ask you to do it because it actually helps us when you do. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Wednesday evening. Talk to you on a Thursday drive. And as always, you can find that right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.